2020 be approved.
Thank you. I'll look for a seconder. Councillor Monroe, thank you very much. Any further discussion before I call for the question? Not seeing any, please raise your hand on all in favor.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, Council. Moving on to item number 4, the approval of the previous meeting minutes. Look for direction from Council. Councillor Buckingham.
I move that the regular council minutes dated June 8th, 2020 be approved.
Thank you. Looking for a seconder. Councillor Baker, thank you very much. Any further discussion to those minutes? Not seeing any, I'll call for the question. All in favor?
Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Opposed? Carried. Moving on to item number 5 is business arising from those minutes. Is there any business that needs to be dealt with at this time? Not seeing any, I will move to item number 6, new business, and 6.1. I'll look to the city manager.
Good afternoon, Your Worship and Council. For the first item, 6.1.1, it's my pleasure, I guess, to present the City of Lloydminster Strategic Plan update for 2020. Issue at hand today is just provide an update for the plan. The background is City Council adopted the City Strategic Plan for 2017 to 21 on October 16, 2017. The plan provides citizens, businesses, administration, and other stakeholders with a high-level overview of Council's vision for the future of Lloydminster. City Council's governance role includes the mandate to provide strategic direction. The strategic plan embodies that direction while supporting administration and operational planning. Annually, the City Council and members of senior administration review the series of goals and strategies and provide a summary including what the strategy identified is and the desire of the achievement. And secondly, the performance measures including how each strategy and goal is measured, targeted timelines, and which team is taking the lead role. So it's before you. The options for today is accept this as information or request further information and bring back to a future regular council meeting. Back to you, Your Worship.
Thank you very much. As noted, the attached has the strategic plan that this council helped set direction in 2017. And I know council, we've received an annual report, and this is the intention to try and keep us up to date and where things are at with different items that were on that. And it's there's a fair amount of information there, but I think I appreciate where administration has moved a lot of the needles forward at the direction of council, and some of them will be ongoing, but some of them I think we've accomplished, and others are for the long term of this community. Any other comments? Councillor Thorson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, just as a general comment on it overall, you know, I look at this as more or less a report card for council and the administration and the direction we give them over our term. And kind of what I see, and hopefully a lot of other, you know, people within administration, within council, and within the public can see that we do have a lot of wins in there. There's a lot of things that we've accomplished. I don't know that we had a good idea of exactly where we were when we started this whole thing. I think quite a bit of our process has been to find out somewhat where all the issues are, being that several of us were newly elected, and then we had new administration, interim managers, things like that. But, you know, when we look at this now, as much as it's not necessarily the we'll say the most exciting subjects, a lot of them, but I feel like we really made a lot of headway, especially in the bylaws, the policies, and a lot of those types of items. I feel like we made a lot of ground within our term. And as far as report cards go, I think that it shows that we got a lot done in our term, especially considering in a way what we were up against as far as some of these problems and how they work. Challenge is now when we look at it is you see that, you know, other problems have developed that came up well after this strategic plan was made that, you know, for the new council coming in are going to have to be top priorities for them. And it's, I don't know, it's interesting to look at, but, you know, some of the things that I'm most proud of on there is I think what we did with the city's finances overall, although there was some challenges that came with it and some fixing of some things when we looked at what the city relied on for revenue in the past and what those new economic realities were and how we had to make adjustments and how we had to adjust budgets accordingly. but I think we're at a place now where we have something, really good foundation for the next council to build off of, so they can have something and really start moving on some of these other priorities that we've identified in our term since then. So when I look at it, it looks like a report card with a lot of check marks on it and a lot of goods. There's some things we obviously, didn't become the top priority one way or another that still need to be a priority moving forward. But, overall, I think I'm pretty proud of where we got to, especially from where we started. So thank you to administration for helping, push all these initiatives forward. And then for all of council for being on board for these things that aren't necessarily the most attractive to the public, but are definitely necessary and definitely push the needle forward. The only other comment I had on there is one that I still find, personally disappointed by in a way. And that's because of the amount of effort that was put into it. Is anything related to annexation. I know that I'm happy that we're moving on and going to the board one way or another. However, I still really feel like we were in such a good position to make a great deal with our neighbors, and we didn't get all the way there. So that one is disappointing for me, especially when we look at where we were to where we are now. So anyway, overall, there's a lot of good things to see. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other? Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to congratulate the administration for what they've done. Jan and his team, when we started out, we were kind of behind the 8 ball, and a lot of work has got done, and then along came the virus, and took a lot of time away, I'm sure, from administration. And I want to thank you for that. I always looked at the strategic plan as a guiding principle. It's not something that's etched in stone, and it never will be, because as Councillor Jonathan said, you're looking 3-4 years out, it's your best guess. And just a good job to all the team that made the effort to bring us to where we are. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments? Councillor Diachak.
Yes, thanks, Your Worship. A couple, I guess, just that I wanted to touch on as well is the fact that, in our plan, we have reserves now for various projects that are imminent, if you like, in terms of must-dos and would like to do coming around the corner. And so the reserves will grow, and I think this council is setting up the future in a very positive and constructive way for the next council, in terms of at least having a starting point relative to some of those big projects. The notion of doing a 2 to 3 year budget plan, I think, is also reflective of a longer looking forward, as opposed to just sort of getting through on a year by year basis, but really being able to see on a longer term where the city's going and the kind of things we need to do. The other part I think that the city and administration and council should be proud of is when I look at the level of public engagement and the efforts that have been made to engage the public in getting opinions, and it goes a long way to the point of accountability and transparency, and the work that's been done, the hiring, the new administration over the time that we've been on council. Again, a big part of the work that's here, and ultimately we rely upon administration to put into action the kind of things that are identified in the plan. And I think overall, I'd say we have to be pleased that the progress, the quality of work, and obviously building the kind of culture and environment we want at City Hall.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments? I will look to council for direction on the report as presented. Councillor Buckingham.
I move the council accepts this report as information.
Thank you. Seconder. Got Councillor Diachak. Thank you very much. Any further discussion? Not seeing any. I'll call for the question. All in favor?
Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Opposed? Carried. Moving on to 6.1.2, the airport master plan. I'll look to the city manager.
Thank you, Your Worship. And prior to moving on to this, I do appreciate the comments from council on the strategic plan, and we will pass those on to the rest of administration. So for 6.1.2, the airport master plan, I'll ask Catlin to present from economic development.
Good afternoon, Catherine.
Good afternoon, Your Worship and members of council. Today, I recommend that council approve the airport master plan as presented. The background on the project was the Lloydminster Regional Airport was completed in 1981 by the province of Alberta, and the city of Lloydminster assumed ownership in 1995. To date, the airport has never had a master plan developed to guide the future position and long-term development. In August of 2019, HM Aero was selected through public tender process by the city of Lloydminster with support from the county of Vermilion River to develop an airport master plan. The objectives of the master plan are to ensure safe and efficient airport operations, guide the city of Lloydminster in progressive development of the airport, forecast demand and provide cost-effective and defensible recommendations to support future activity level, maximize the value of the Lloydminster Airport to the region as a socio-economic asset by planning for future development and revenue generating opportunities, to ensure that the future land uses represent the highest and best use of the airport and are compatible with the site context, and to gain a comprehensive understanding of stakeholder views. This master plan was divided into 3 planning horizons: the short-term, medium-term, and long-term. The development of the master plan included 3 open houses, on-site meetings with stakeholders, and meetings with over 31 stakeholder organizations, telephone interviews, and public surveys. Do we have any questions regarding to the report as presented?
Councillor Buckingham.
Thank you, Worship. Thanks, Catlin. You know, I think it's one of those things that that we stated early on, and I know different organizations within the community had, like the Chamber of Commerce had stated, how important it is to have a thriving airport, both to tourism, economic development, and generally the growth of the region. So it's nice to see that all the work's gone into this. Really big on the community stakeholder engagement. There was lots of people that have a vested interest in that airport, as I think we all should. And I think sometimes it's understated how important that airport is. When someone's looking to expand or come into the market, they're going to ask you, what's the long range plan for this? What are we going to be able to do? How are we going to grow our business utilizing this airport? So having this plan is overdue, and there's been a great amount of work put into it. And I thank everybody, both the public and administration, for all their efforts in getting this very important piece put together for the future of our region.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Baker, I believe you had your hand.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to ask a question. You know, where the airport's going to go in 25 years is a pretty big question. But to the northwest, we have a quarter of land that the city purchased. And the runway 31 or whatever it is you call it, heading northwest is, I don't know, it's 31. I don't know if that gets into that quarter or not, but in the agreement, when we took that quarter in, it's in the municipality, or pardon me, the county. There was an agreement that before we did anything with airport development in that quarter, that the county would have input and be part of the, I believe, commercial industrial development in that quarter section. Something to that effect. So you might red flag it and make sure you got that covered. But I'm not sure where that runway, the alternate runway will go. And that's, I know it's long term, but just thought you should know that if nobody's picked it up. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm just trying to find the map in particular, and I think there it is. I found it on page 26, I believe, of the report. If I've got my pages right. And refers to that current grass runway on the turf runway. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that as you've noted, I believe it is located, I hope in the report, Catlin might be able to shed some light on it. I know that that was part of the reason that was done jointly with the county to ensure that there was opportunities for, but not to be lost, because I think what happens around that airport is very important for construction and development, but that it's regulated and controlled to ensure the airspace around our airport continues to serve the people it needs to serve.
Just to follow up.
Sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Catlin.
Oh, sorry. No, and that just going back to that, and that's why the County of Vermilion River was part of the process from the beginning. And they did provide funds to complete this project.
I'm sorry, they provided what?
They provided funds, like they were a big part of this whole process, to the point where they also committed funds for the actual document.
Okay, I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah. So
But in any case, just to make sure that our newer administration is aware of, there's an issue. That's all I'm saying. Thank you.
thanks, Councillor. Any other questions or comments, Councillor Fagin? Oh, you're still muted, Councillor. We'll get you unmuted there.
Got it. There. Yeah, I'd like to echo Councillor Buckingham's thoughts there, and I certainly appreciate these master plans. You know, whether it's the fire master plan or just going through our strategic plan with the airport here. I think it's great that it gives us the current state and the plans over the next 25 years. And I think that it's so important to have these plans so they can be tracked and measured to follow and to remain focused. And even the best laid plans do have can change, but this is certainly a great general map or a guide for the future. So it's just nice to see, and it's about time, I guess, that we've got this. So good on everybody, as just like the strategic plan, those that were involved in this plan as well.
Well said, Councillor. I think that without a plan, we don't always know where we're headed. And I think this is by giving administration that direction through council, that at least they have something to start with. Appreciate having the team that we have at the airport as part of the administration that serves the community on a daily basis. And the commitment that they show out there is shown time after time by people that use our airport, and certainly appreciate that. And I think it's important that we give them something to work with, as well as the general administration, lead back to council. We've got a 5-year window. We've got a greater horizon in the midterm, and then the long term. And I think without having some long-term planning, we may not be going where we want to go. So I appreciate the information that's in this package. Councillor Thorson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, just, as far as these master plans go, you sometimes get intimidated by just the simple amount of volume of dollars it takes to get things to a certain standard or where we're trying to get to. And, you don't often see one where it doesn't feel overwhelming. And from what we've heard through this report and from the consultants, we're actually in a great position with the Lloydminster Airport as an asset that the city owns, that we can do a lot of great things, and it's at a cost that we can potentially actually hang with it. We can actually do the necessary upgrades over the short term, over the medium term, and potentially over the long term, which will get full use of that asset to really help drive the economic opportunities and even the kind of pleasure travel type of opportunities that you can get with having an airport like that. So I just it's really great to hear from what we've seen in this report and what we've heard in general, and it sounds manageable, which is great to hear. So thank you very much.
Any other comments or questions from council? Not seeing any, I will look for direction from council on 6.1.2 Airport Master Plan. Councillor Diachuk.
Move that council approve the airport master plan as presented.
Thank you. Seconder, Councillor Fagnan. Thank you very much. Any further discussion before I call for the question? Not seeing any, I'll call for the question. All in favor? You're good, City Clerk?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Opposed? Carried. Moving on to, thanks very much, Catlin,
Thank you, guys.
that report. Moving on to 6.3, I'll look to the City Manager.
Thank you, Your Worship. For 6.3.1, appointment of external auditors for the 2020 consolidated financial statements, I'll ask the CFO, Denise McDonald, to present.
Good afternoon, Council.
Good afternoon, Denise.
And Your Worship. Before you today, I'm bringing forward a bookkeeping item. Annually, Council must appoint the auditors for the city. The audited appointer must provide a report to Council on the annual financial statements and financial information return of the city for their review and comment. On last year, in July, council accepted a quote provided by WLS, Chartered Professional Accountants, to perform the audit for the city of Lloydminster for 2 consecutive years from 2019 to 2020. Their audit fee, as quoted, was $59,000 plus tax for 2019 and $60,475 plus tax for 2020. The quote is inclusive of the FCSS audit, Saskatchewan grant audit, and the Alberta financial information return. With that, we ask that council appoint WLS Chartered Professional Accountants to perform the audit for 2020 consolidated financial statements, or choose to not appoint them, and the other option is to provide administration with further direction on this matter.
Thank you very much, CFO. Questions or comments, council? Councillor Thorson.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is just a kind of a general question. How many years has WLS been doing the city's audit?
That is a good question. I don't have an answer for it. I'll have to get back to you on it. I did, their fees have come down. They have done, I've been here 2 years. They've done it since I've been here. And I know they've done it for a number of years prior to that.
Right.
We would be looking at, when we reviewed this in July of 19, we realized that we need to do some more work with them to have a better process on our side before we go to retender and invite other auditors into the process. So we would be looking to retender this after the 2020 statements.
Okay. Yeah, it's just there's various schools of thought on this, and someone who's been in that world, there's nothing wrong with switching it up, you know, for a period of time, because the same people potentially looking at the same types of documents over and over may end up getting more or less the same result, and you don't necessarily get the continuous improvement you're looking at from the perspective of an audit. I'm not suggesting, however, that that's an issue. That's just more of a general statement. So not me saying that we need to switch auditors or that I don't believe that you're getting that continuous improvement, because, you know, from a council perspective, we do have an opportunity to chat with them and meet with them, and they give us kind of their outlook on those things, and they talk about new and upcoming things. So I think that that's still continuing to happen, but it's just a general kind of rule of thumb that, you know, when you get a fresh set of eyes looking at things, then it sometimes shows something different. But, you know, as far as what we said we would do, which is to keep in the contract for the 2 years, I don't see any indication as to why we would go in any different direction than that. So I'm fine with it. And I do believe, yeah, I can recall that the audit fees were higher in the past, and they were also being asked to do a lot more of the preparation of things for the annual year end and things like that. Whereas our CFO, Denise, and her team have taken that on and do a lot more themselves which in the end reduce fees because it's fewer hours required to complete a year end. So anyway, good work, Denise.
Certainly, and also they haven't, even though they quoted us 59,000, we haven't been billed that, and we expect it will not be at that. We haven't received the final bill, but I know it will be under budget, under what they've quoted. So we did gain some efficiencies, and certainly I can't personally take a whole bunch of credit for it other than leading. Our finance team has worked very hard on processes and making it better, and each year we're adding to those processes to make it more efficient for us and the auditors. So it was important that we worked with the current auditor to get things where we need them to be, so that if somebody new stepped in, we could actually handle the audit.
Awesome. Well, end of the day, pass on those kudos to your team, but I wouldn't discount your leadership as helping get there.
Thank you.
Thank you. I saw the city clerk, but I do have Councilor Baker, but go ahead, city clerk.
Just to inform council that we just checked the records and they go back to 2010, and WLS has been auditing since 2010. We possibly before that, but our records go to 2010 at this point.
Thank you very much. Councilor Baker, you have the floor.
Yes, well, thank you, Worship. Two things. One was to answer the question about time. I think Wilkinson Livingston have been doing it for at least 25 years. As far as I know, as long as I know, they've been looking after it. In the audit itself, we've had some rocky years with, and it's been explained to council over and over and over about what wasn't done for the audit that should have been done, and all those different letters. And I think somewhere in my files, I still have a bunch of those letters. We don't see that anymore. And keep in mind, you may have the same company with the same name, but quite often there's a new lead looking at the audit, and they switch the lead so that you aren't doing the same thing over and over and over again. And I know that that's happened in my day on council. But now that I've said that, just for something to think about, there's something to be said about a continuing consistency. And as Denise pointed out earlier, you got to work with somebody to get it where both offices work and mesh together properly. And if you keep changing coaches every day, you're going to be starting over and over and over. And I think that our CFO and all the folks at the finance department and other departments that have to feed information into that department, I would believe what I see, and I'm certainly not in the business that Jonathan is in, but I see a remarked improvement in how reports are made and what we see and how I feel about confident that we're doing things right as a city. And I think that's really important to keep in mind. At the end of the day, the numbers are up to the audit to prove them right or wrong. I can't do that, but for the most part, I think that it's been excellent. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Well said. And I think that both points are well taken that have been expressed. Certainly, continuation and seeing a flow that where you don't want to be changing players continuously, but also on the other side that having a second view from a different seat over a long term is also beneficial. So I think that appreciate what the CFO has brought forward, saying that right now, 2020, they'd like to propose what they've proposed, and it's going to go out for bid, and then we'll take it from there and leave that to the next council to handle that in 2020 or in 2021 and how they move forward from that perspective. Councillor Thorson.
And just one more point I was going to make, not to discount what I was saying before, but I absolutely agree with Councillor Baker as well, is that when you do have, some partners and things like that within a firm, and they looked after an audit from a leadership perspective, and they have the people underneath them who kind of know what to look for and know how to work with a particular client, there's absolutely efficiencies you can find. You absolutely can run into a year like this year where potentially the fees are going to be below what was quoted, and you're not going to hit the maximum upset limit. So there's definitely some benefit to going in that direction as well. So it'll be interesting to see, what the CFO brings us next year, but I'm totally comfortable with going in the direction we are this year. So thank you.
Thank you. I'll look around. Is there any other comments from council? Not seeing any. I'll look for direction from council on 6.3.1, the appointment of external auditors for the 2020 consolidated financial statements. Councillor Fagnan.
I move that council appoint WLS LLP Chartered Professional Accountants to perform the audit for the 2020 consolidated financial statements of the City of Lloydminster.
Thank you very much. A seconder, Councillor Baker. Thank you very much. Any further discussion before I call for the question? Not seeing any. All in favor, please raise your hand.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, CFO. And I believe by the looks of the agenda, moving on to the CFO for 6.3.2. CFO, you have the floor.
Thank you, Council and your Mayor. I'm looking at the nonprofit grant program. The 2021 budget process has commenced, and we're looking for direction from Council on how to proceed with the nonprofit grant program. Based on the discussions in the GPC June 15th, as well as guidance from the committee on how to proceed with the nonprofit grant program. We're proposing to negotiate 2 to 3 year funding agreements for the nonprofit annual operating grant groups commencing for the 2021 budget year and subsequent years. The agreements will be brought forward to council for approval. The remaining portion of the applications are the nonprofit one-time operating grant requests, and we would forward those to the budget process for 2021. Should there be budget funds available to fund the program, we would call for applications January, February of 2021. In addition to that, if council approves our proposal, then we would bring back the nonprofit operating grant amendments to the policy. So with that, I ask that council approve the 2 motions above and to negotiate the 2 to 3 year funding agreements effective for the 2021 budget, and to defer the nonprofit one-time operating grant process to the budget process for 2021.
Thank you, CFO. Councillor Thorson.
Thank you, Your Worship. So, my perspective on this from what we heard last meeting and what you're proposing now, I think I'm very much kind of in favor of going this route. One that I think is important is, as the City of Lloydminster is trying to move to a 3-year operating budget and a 10-year capital budget, as we've seen in the strategic plan, we're trying to head in that direction. I think that it would be beneficial to look at these, kind of every year asks that are somewhat part of our mandate as a city, whether that be economic development or the theater or things like that. I think that it would be, a good use of the finance team's time and the team that, like the entire committee that's dealing with those grants, good use of their time to kind of go through this process on a 3-year rolling basis. I think it would be more useful in the long run, especially when they're items that, really do fall under our mandate. I also like the idea of coming up with a pool of money first for what's going to be available for grants, and then asking for the applications afterwards. So kind of setting the pool when we set the budget, and then asking for those applications. So then, individual groups, once we have the kind of the parameters set around what types of things we're looking for applications, they can choose whether to make an application or select themselves out of the process if they don't believe that what they are doing fits the mandate of what the funds set aside are for. So I think that it will be a good process, and hopefully we'll have good uptake, but not necessarily to the extent that you're going to have a bunch of different groups putting in a whole bunch of effort for something where there may not actually be funds available for them. So I think that we, in a way, we tried something, we found that there were some issues with it, and now there's an opportunity to try something a little bit different to try and clean up what some of those issues were. So I like it, to be honest. So thank you.
Sorry, I was turned off. Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Richard. Just so I make sure I got this marked down right. The nonprofit, the first reference, is that to theater, library, and SPCA?
Actually, I believe it's to the theater and the SPCA, and I'll look to the CFO to correct me, because the library is actually coming in under a separate budget line item now because of our commitment to the library. Is that correct, CFO?
Yes, the library is handled within our budget process already.
Okay, it's no longer involved in this. Okay.
Yeah, and so there's actually the ones that we identified that we will bring back forward as Vic Juba, the SPCA, and possibly Startup if we're going to negotiate that one also. But we certainly look to your direction on that.
But at our GPC meeting, we talked about that, and I just don't know if I had my notes right. That's why I wanted to make sure that I understood that.
Yes, the library is under our regular budget process already.
Yeah,
for
that's the one I missed.
20. We already did that for the last budget process for 2020.
Thank you, yours, sorry.
Nope, thank you, Counselor. Good question. I want to add my comments. I think CFO, that was a great idea about, and I appreciate Counselor Torreson's comments saying that it's hard to give away money or ask for money, to put various nonprofit groups through the process and including our own team at city administration, and then not have any money for you and put all that legwork into it. And I think that well, let's try and figure this out. And I look to Councillor Baker because we always go through the budget and then the dollars and that. And if you don't have dollars, you can't give away, but you can't budget for it. So I think that I really appreciate applying that to this process and going forward, especially with the second motion that's being proposed, because until we know, there's no use putting anybody through that strenuous process, because a lot of people put a lot of hard work into that. Those are volunteers, volunteer hours are consumed. And if there is paid staff, they're busy putting energy into that. And if there's not even a chance to reward, it's a waste of time for everybody's part. And I guess that's as close to red tape reduction as we can come to. I think that eliminates paper when there's no paper that's going to have value. So I certainly support this idea as well. Any other comments from council? Not seeing any. I will look for direction on 6.3.2 and 2 motions, please. Councillor Buckingham, you have the floor.
Thank you, Worship. I'll move the council approve administration to negotiate a 2 to a maximum 3-year funding agreement effective 2021 budget year with specific nonprofit annual operating grant organizations, and that the agreements be brought forward to a future regular council meeting for approval, and that council approve deferring the nonprofit one-time operating grant processes to the 2021 budget process and timelines.
Thank you. Does that work, City Clerk?
We can make it work.
You can make it work. Thank you. I'll look for a seconder to that motion. I've got Councillor Diachuk. Thank you very much. Any further discussion? Not seeing any. I'll call for the question. All in favor?
Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, CFO, for that. Muchly appreciated. Great work. Moving on to agenda item 6.4, I'll look to the city manager.
Thank you, Your Worship. To present 6.4.1 Community Services Advisory Committee appointments, I'll ask Patrick Lancaster to present.
Good afternoon, Your Worship. Good afternoon, Council.
Good afternoon, Patrick.
Sounds like I'm coming through okay.
Yes, you are.
So I'm presenting today on for Community Development Services on appointments to the Community Services Advisory Committee. With the passing of bylaw number 13/2020, the Community Services Advisory Bylaw, the Family and Community Services Advisory Committee ceased to be a thing, and we had a new committee that would take its place. As identified at that council meeting, we would need to come back and reappoint our committee members. And so that's the purpose of this request for decision. We went and we approached each of the members of the committee, or of the FCSS committee, and all have agreed to return and continue serving on the new Community Services Advisory Committee. Our conversations with them, we asked if some would voluntarily stagger their terms. So you'll see in the recommendations, we have some appointees who would serve for a full 2-year term and some who would serve for a 1-year term. And that's just to ensure that as terms expire and as they come up, that we're not left in a position where everyone is all done at the same time. Ensure there's some continuation for the committee. The advisory committee is comprised of 7 city volunteers, one of which is a youth appointee between the ages of 14 and 24, and another is a member of council, for a total of 8 members. The council appointee, or Councillor Buckingham, I've been advised that because he was appointed as part of the December 2019 council appointments, that he did not need to be reappointed as part of this, that he would continue, or his appointment would carry over with this batch until such time council appointments were made again at the end of the year, usually December. So we have two recommendations. One that council approved the appointment of Don Mackenzie Winehandle, Emmy Kuipers, and apologies if I'm getting pronunciations wrong, Muriel Ralston and Kent Weir to the advisory committee for a 2-year term from June 2020 to June 2022. And that council approve appointment of Amy Levesque, Dabir Navik, Shonda Smith to the Community Service Advisory Committee for a 1-year term, June 2020 to June 2021. Are there any questions?
Questions or comments, council? Patrick, I believe if I've seen the names in the past, these are all current members of that committee that, so there's no new members, but we've kept the same members basically and just meeting the new guidelines as directed by the bylaw.
That's correct, Your Worship. All members who served on the previous committee have agreed to stay on and serve on the new committee. So there was no call for applications at this time. In the event of a vacancy, we would put out a public call for applications for new members.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Not seeing any, I will look for direction from council on 6.4.1 in the form of 2 motions. Councilor Diachuk.
I'll move that council, pardon me, approve the appointment of Don Mackenzie Winehandle, Amy Kuipers, Muriel Ralston, and Kent Weir to the Community Services Advisory Committee for a 2-year term from June 2020 to June 2022.
Thank you. I'll look for a seconder. Councilor Torreson, thank you very much. Any further discussion before I call for the question? Not seeing any. All in favor, please raise your hand.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Opposed, carried. I'll look to Councilor Diachuk.
Move that council approve the appointment of Amy Levesque, Dabir Navik, and Shonda Smith to the Community Services Advisory Committee for a 1-year term from June 2020 to June 2021.
Thank you. I'll look for a seconder. Councilor Monroe, thank you very much. Any further discussion? Not seeing any. I'll call for the question. All in favor, please raise your hand.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Opposed and carried. Thank you very much, Patrick. I believe you're up again for 6.4.2, so I'll turn the floor to you again, Patrick, to carry on, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. The second item I'm here to speak about today is Saskatchewan Lotteries Community Grant 2019-2020 reallocations. This is actually pretty exciting to be able to talk about. This is a process that has been going on for a while as part of Saskatchewan Lotteries, but we haven't had a chance to talk about it with council before or bring it to council. What happens is, as you guys are well aware, every year the city receives funds through Saskatchewan Lotteries Community Grant, and those funds are then allocated out to different sport, culture, and recreation groups. Or different nonprofit organizations to support sport, culture, and recreation within the community. The city typically receives $81,414. Late in 2019, I believe, about a year ago, allocations were made for the 2019-2020 Sask Lottery cycle, and 12 different projects received funding for this. As part of the reporting requirements, each project is required to submit a final report, and all of their expenditures need to be supported by either individual receipts or an audited statement, basically affirming that they spent the funds on specific expenditures that are eligible for the Saskatchewan Lotteries grant. And there's a number of different expenses which are eligible and not eligible. We've received all the reporting from the 12 projects, and we've found that there were several projects within that group that either did not spend their total allotment because they did not have appropriate expenditures to allocate the expenditure to, or they came in under budget and did not require the full amount of funding that they were allotted. And you can see that we have a bit of a breakdown chart that explains those in a little bit more detail. So because 5 organizations were not able to utilize their full amount, we were left with $3,015.71 of unused funds. Now, these funds can either be reallocated to other organizations or returned to Saskatchewan Lotteries Community Grant Program. And every year we work with Saskatchewan Lotteries to try to keep every penny within the community, within Lloydminster. So what we're allowed to do is, provided that other organizations or other projects have eligible expenditures, we are allowed to submit basically those funds under, or reallocate those funds to the different projects, and keep those dollars within the community. So we've made recommendations, and I want to be clear, is normally we would go and we would utilize the advisory committee to make a recommendation around this and consult with them. However, the timing didn't quite line up this year with the appointments, of course, happening today. So this recommendation is coming from administration. Having said that, we did consult with the members of the advisory committee with the understanding that it would not be their recommendation, just to get a sense of if they were comfortable with or had questions about our recommendation. And of the of the 7 members who responded back, all were comfortable with the recommendations. The recommendations for reallocation were essentially based on which organizations had additional receipts or sufficient receipts that could be used to claim the unused dollars, and if they had not received their full ask. So I believe 4 organizations that were recommending receive the balance. Each of those had basically wiggle room in their reporting because they submitted additional receipts as part of their project that we could do the reallocation. And so we topped up 3 to their full ask, and then there was sufficient left that inclusion Lloydminster could receive the remainder there for over $1,800. So a little bit of a journey to get there, but I would definitely be happy to field any questions about these recommendations, and we're seeking direction on whether to proceed or return the funds to Saskatchewan Lotteries.
Thank you, Patrick. Questions or comments from council? Councilor Thorson.
Thank you, Your Worship. No, I just wanted to say, great job to Patrick and his team to ensure that all of the funds that are allocated to our community find a way to go to programs in our community. I think that, although the process may not have been what you would normally have, at the end of the day, you found a way to make it work. And it's just good to see that, even if it's not a lot of money, it's still finding a way to get to the programs and services delivered in Lloydminster. So thank you.
Well said. I think that anytime we can see money redeployed and put into a nonprofit's hands rather than returning it back to the lottery fund, it's great to see that money being put to use in our city. Any other comments? And I appreciate, Patrick, you bringing forward that it was an administrative recommendation, but you were supported by the committee members of the past until today. We're also in support because they would have been responsible for making that allocation, the original allocation. So certainly they were familiar with the groups and saw the packages that were proposed when they put the allocation in. So that's terrific. Appreciate that. Any further comments? Not seeing any. I'll look for direction from council on 6.4.2 Saskatchewan Lotteries Community Grant 2019-2020 reallocations. Councillor Munro.
Council approve the following recommended Saskatchewan Lottery Community Grant reallocations. $140.97 to the Lloydminster Air Cadets 186 Squadron Incorporated for 186 Air Cadets, $70 to the Friends of the Lloydminster Regional Archives, formerly Lloydminster District Centennial Commemorative Association, for saving and sharing the Midwest televised history, $924.16 to the Libby Young Center Incorporated for the Summer Recreation Program, and $1,880.58 to the Lloydminster Association for Community Living, Inclusion Lloydminster, for a recreation liaison.
Thank you, Councillor. Seconder, Councillor Buckingham. Thank you very much. Is there any further question or comment before I call for the question? Not seeing any. All in favor, please raise your hand.
Thank you, Worship.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, Patrick. Keep up the great work. Moving on to agenda item 6.4.3. I'll look to the city manager.
Thank you, Your Worship. For 6.4.3 Lloydminster Culture and Science Center options, I'll ask Don Stang to present.
Thank you, City Manager. Good afternoon, Council. Before you, we have the Lloydminster Culture and Science Center options. This was being brought forward as per the last GPC meeting on June 17th. Administration's looking for a recommendation from Council to either that Council direct administration to proceed with the recommendation as approved during the February 24th, 2020 regular council meeting, motion number 50-2020, that Council direct administration to negotiate a lease on a 10-year term for a facility that will provide space for a temporary relocation of the Cultural and Science Center, and that Council approve request for administration to permanently close and plan for decommissioning and demolition of the Lloydminster Culture and Science Center building located at 4515 44th Street, Lloydminster, Saskatchewan, with a closure date to be determined as per Council's direction, and that Council direct administration to procure a commercial lease premise and its construction, relocate the Lloydminster Archives in Proming until a space in the commercial lease premise is constructed and commissioned, set up the Saskatchewan Tourism Building, adhere to the Lloydminster Collections Management Policy 761-01 as it pertains to LCSC permanent displays, and negotiate termination of the Imhoff contract. In addition, that capital cost required to relocate two commercial lease spaces in the amount of $1,444,780 to be funded through Capital Reserve General Government Account number 1-700-130-33 or 35110, or option B, that Council rescind motion 50-20 as approved during the regular council meeting on February 24th, 2020. Two, that Council direct administration to utilize available space within a city facility that being the Service Sports Center that will house space for the Lloydminster Archives, programming, pottery, and administration offices. Three, that Council approve the request for administration to permanently close and plan for the decommission and demolition of the Lloydminster Culture and Science Center. Again, a date to be determined as per Council's direction. Four, that Council direct administration to procure the construction space in the Service Sports Center, relocate Lloydminster Archives and programming until the Service Sports Center is ready, set up Saskatchewan Tourism Building, adhere to the Museum Collections Management Policy number 76101, and negotiate the termination of the Imhoff contract. In addition, that the capital cost required to relocate to the Service Sports Center in the amount of $457,000 to be funded through Capital Reserve General Account number 1-700-130-35110. The rest of the report, Your Worship, is exactly as it was presented at the last GPC meeting, other than I want to bring attention to one correction that was made for this report, and that was under option C. As you can see on page 188 of your agenda or page 2 of the admin report, under option C, the number has been amended. The total 10-year operating, including capital fund number has been reduced to $23,011,966, and I can go into that if you flip to page, sorry, I had it here. Page 203 of your council agenda or page 12 of the attached report. What we had in the previous GPC meeting, we accounted for the $17 million capital expense to build a new building. A member of council brought it to our attention that we should review and determine if those capital funds were allocated in the debenture payment. We did go back and review that and have revised the overall budget for option C to take that into consideration. At the bottom of page 203 of your agenda, Wendy, if you can go one more page, there you go. On the bottom right-hand corner, there's a note as it pertains to those funds. The total represents debenture payments only for 10 years. So the 23 million only represents debenture payments for the 10 years, but the rate is based on a 20-year debenture. So that all we're stating there is there would be a remaining $9,600,000 plus or minus of debenture payments after the 10 years. So trying to compare all three of those options the same on a 10-year platform. And that's kind of how we came up with that, and I hope that provides clarity there. One other point of clarity, there was a question came forward with regards to the different space allocations between option A, which is the option we would be looking to lease a commercial space. We did a high level of one of the spaces that was being reviewed prior to the February 24th council meeting. That space was approximately 11 to 12,000 square feet. Within that building, or within that space, we had allocated around 400 square feet for a lobby, reception, stores. We had allocated about 1,000 square feet for the city's own permanent artifact display. We had allocated 2,000 square feet for a traveling exhibit display, so that would be rotating as traveling exhibits would come through. We had approximately 1,500 square feet allocated for storage, 800 square feet for public washrooms, 2,000 square feet approximately for programming in two separate areas. That's two separate, so approximately 1,000 per room for programming. And then we had approximately 22,000 square, or 2,200, my apologies, not 1,000, 2,200 square feet for offices, lunchroom, and staffing washrooms. And then within the Service Sports Center, the space that that potentially would be available is around 7,000 square feet. In there, we did not have any space allocated for the city's own archive display, nor did we have any space available to do a traveling exhibit. What we were contemplating putting in there, around 2,000 square feet of programming space, similar to option A, 1,000 square feet for the archives, again, very comparable. Only 1,000 square feet for storage, and about 2,500 for offices, lobby, lunchroom, and washrooms. So that gives you a comparable between those two options. Just want to also point out that our current facility space that's available for usage is around 17,533 square feet, and that a new building contemplates around 35,000 square feet of space, usable space. So with all that, Your Worship, I'll pass it back to you if there's any questions or comments.
Thank you, Executive Manager Stang. Questions or comments, Council? I'll kick it off then. Executive Manager Stang, you brought two options forward, and in the community in the last couple of weeks, we've heard about an option 3 for a new building, which you had alluded to in your notes. And I actually had 1 or 2 or 3 individuals stop me and ask me about option 4, and that was just not to do anything at all. The building needs to be closed. And I think that I appreciate what administration has brought forward to help people understand that with option 1, and I'll just make sure I've got myself squared away because I've had this discussion with a few people. Option 1 would give us basically very similar to what we have for square footage at the current facility, less the Imhoff Gallery, less the OTS exhibit, less the Fuchs display. Am I correct on that?
That is correct. At the end of the day, Your Worship, we would also be allocating in that lease space about 1,000 square feet to house the city own artifact display. And that currently isn't anything we do in our facility today. So we would be offsetting one of those exhibits for our own exhibit there.
Terrific.
If that makes sense.
It does. It does. So the second part is that the tourism building would be redeployed to be used so that the outside exhibits would be open for a period of time, basically spring, summer, and early fall, because we realize that not many people use the outside exhibits in the snow. So that's what the intention of the Saskatchewan Tourism Building is, if people are wondering what we're doing there.
Yeah, that's correct, Your Worship. Right now it's used for programming, and we do have some rentals that use that space. That space would be converted to house our collection staff, as all the artifacts are on site at the current location of the Culture and Science Center in what we call the Red Barn in the back. So the staff that are working daily with those artifacts would then be moved to the Sask Tourism Building. And then during the summer months, we would have additional staff there to man the outdoor area, so that people could come and roam around in the back and see what we have to offer there.
Thank you. I know, I'm sure each council member has heard from the public. I know I've heard from numerous members of the public, and I appreciate their input. I think that, like I say, I heard from various people about all 4 options, as I like to refer to it as. And, you know, I appreciate the city administration conducting the survey. The survey came back very strongly suggesting option number 1, that the city needs to support culture and arts as well as our history. And there's so many moving pieces. And I think anyone that's had been to our museum knows that there's, and I call it a museum, there's a museum, there's an arts center, there's an oil field interpretive center. There's a lot of moving pieces to our facility. And it's challenging when the building hasn't cooperated. And every council, I believe, for the last number of councils have had an opportunity to try and tackle this. And it looks like, I think it's landed in our council's lap that we do have to tackle this. And certainly I appreciate the work that administration's done. They've looked at, and again, back to the input from people. If option 3 was a realistic option, if we had the money today, I would certainly support that. But I think that this council knows, and we've talked about it in the public, and I hope the public's heard us, the funds are not there for option 3, in my opinion. I'm not prepared to take a risk to commit $17 million and not have our wastewater treatment plant finished, because that is a need. This is a wish and a want for a $17 million Culture and Science Center, and I hope we can get there. And I've heard from the public, and I'll say this, I'm really looking forward to engaging people after this decision, and as we move forward after COVID, and talk about getting down to the roots of raising money and talking about what people want. And I truly appreciate that. I know there's volunteers in the community that are eager, and we want to help work with them, because as a council, and I hope future councils will follow that lead, that we need to build this as a community. Every one of the pieces over there, I understand, has a deep history. Richard Larson invested numerous hours of his own personal time and numerous donations from community organizations, as well as we've had that continue on. Read an article on the weekend about a local business that helped donate, do some work for the Heritage Society and things like that, and didn't say no. And I think we can move to that point, but at the time we're sitting today, we're challenged. And to be able to provide for the youth, for the arts, the culture that go with this, I think option A is our best option, in my opinion. And I think that it'll give something to work with and a goal. And I think when a goal is set, there's an opportunity to reach that goal. And we haven't ever had that goal. We've kind of looked in the distance, but we've never set a goal. And if we want to set a goal, let's set a goal after this is done. If it's 10 years, and move forward and get the community behind that, and let the community get involved, because I think that's one of the challenges we've had. We've taken it for bits and pieces and in the past, and I would really like to see that move forward. But I'd like to turn it over to Councillor Munro and then Councillor Diachuk.
Thank you. So I know council, administration, the communities had a lot to ponder over the last few months regarding this topic. And just a direct question, I guess, for Executive Manager Stang is that, you know, even to say we're going to move forward with option 1, should council decide that, you know, that isn't necessarily saying that option C is out of the picture. Option C would then, would you say it would be a fair statement to say that option C really is up to the community? If our community is able to collaborate and have a fundraising committee struck up, and we have large donors step up, and our community raises a fair amount of money for this initial project, would that be something you would say that the city could revisit in 4 or 5 years to that it doesn't necessarily have to be that 10-year time frame?
Yeah, I'll answer a piece of that and maybe look to Dion to fill in after. One of the things we'd be looking at as we go out to request for proposals to secure a lease space is to look at a longer term lease, number one, to get hopefully better rates on a long term, and number two, to justify the $1.5 million investment that we're going to have to put in from a capital perspective. But at the end of the day, you are correct. If all of a sudden we had enough money to build a facility, then I guess that would again come back to council for consideration on moving forward at that given time and opt out of a lease, because there would be potentially some implications to do that, a cost to get out of it, and those types of things. So,
right.
Dion, any other?
No, I think very well said, Don. I think the three things that we'd be taking into consideration is obviously our debt limit, over the next number of years as we proceed with not only the wastewater treatment plant, the fire hall, all those, and what the impact that has, as well as the impact of the payments have on our operational budget year to year. And the third factor is the operational cost of a new building. As Don said earlier, if you're doubling your square footage, potentially, and we don't have those numbers, it depends on your operational cost could conceivably go up significantly as well. So those are the three numbers, and Don's right. Future council will have that before them to determine if they feel that's the best way to go, and administration would act accordingly.
Right. So just to follow up with that, I think it's really important that the community does know that, that we have a lot of people that are very passionate about this project. And I would hope that maybe some of that passion is put behind fundraising efforts and efforts to collaborate maybe with major sponsors, or in the past, we have had people that are passionate about sports step up and donate significantly to different projects. And, perhaps that is something that our community will come forward with. But I just wanted to really lay it out for the community that, option A doesn't mean option C doesn't exist. It just means it's not happening in the foreseeable future, right? Another thing I would just comment with is that, if we do move forward with option A, are we, option B, do we have that revenue stream that for renting out the potential space that we were going to move into? Are we financially secure that we feel that we'll still have rental space for that location? Does that make sense, what I just said? Option B, option B, if we don't move forward with option B, are we confident that we will still have a lease holder or anyone to be moving into that space if we don't go ahead with option B?
Again, Dion, Doug, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is they're waiting for today's direction to see where they need to go from a business perspective. So Dion, Doug, I think that's accurate.
That would be an accurate statement.
Okay, thank you. I just want to make sure that that's not something that we have to be fearful of and work into another expense for option A would be also that lost revenue, right? So thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Diachuk, and then followed by Councillor Thorson and then Councillor Baker.
Thanks, Your Worship. I guess a couple of things, and I was trying to find different ways to look at this particular dilemma, if you like, or problem or concern. And it's what are we in control of and what are we not in control of? And I think it's important for folks to understand what pieces we're not in control of. The building has reached life end, and we have to make some decisions around, what we have to do. We can't stay in that building, so a decision has to be made. What we are in control of, though, however, going forward is, and I would say the option A provides us a lot more variables, a lot more options to look at. And as we met with consultants around recreation and other pieces, if you like, we talk about multi-purpose buildings and the potential of perhaps even having a museum and a library together. So all of a sudden you're reducing some of the, or putting together some of the operational costs so that you don't have 2 buildings that you're looking at. You might have 1 and might have that extra size. Those are pieces that we're in control of going forward. And I think that 10-year period is not an extraordinary amount of time. It does give us the opportunity to get our financial sort of house in order. It gives us the opportunity to look at the kind of vision we want for the museum. Because at this point, we know that, you know, going forward with the Western development style or Ukrainian village style of museum is not sustainable. So we really need to sharpen our vision and sharpen what we want to do relative with that museum so that it is sustainable. And we can't just say, well, we'll build a museum and it's going to look like the old one. I don't think that's the solution. I think we really need to dig into that a lot more. And that's a part that we're in control of. We're also in control of the potential of having a library being part of the museum, the archives, all these other pieces that fit together. And as I think Councillor Monroe suggested, there are a number of individuals who have a passion for this. We see the importance of arts in a lot of other communities and the impact on economic development. In Calgary, it's extremely significant. The money that is paid out by council, but then they look at the return back and how it contributes back into our community. And we've seen some of the numbers around the number of visits, sort of the traffic that goes through the museum. And as we begin to start pulling all these pieces together, I think we might be able to develop a product, to develop a vision for a new museum that will do all of the above and be able to expand our base, expand our vision, and expand in a way that's sustainable. And I think right now that's part of the challenge, because as we look at, you know, yes, we've created some reserves, but the reality is that the funds we have are committed in large part towards the project we have ahead of us. We have the wastewater treatment plant, we have the fire hall, we're going to need an arena down the road, and we need to find a way to be able to say to people that arts is important. And taking the time over the 10 years to build that vision that's sustainable does 2 things. One, it honors that culture and arts piece and science, but it also does it in a way that's sustainable so that it's not going to be crippling future councils and residents of the city with a taxation rate that is not sustainable. So I like the idea of the option A, and it gives us that opportunity to develop that longer term goal that really has the potential to make a difference in our community.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Thorson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, when we take everything that we've seen so far on this subject and all the feedback we've heard from different members of the community, I think that option A does the most for the most number of people and actually helps get some of that programming and exhibit space and makes it so we can show some of our artifacts that we have. And I think overall just puts a product out there that is potentially even better than what we have right now. Because what we have right now, we can't even necessarily display those artifacts. Like, we just don't have the ability to do it, not to mention the building's falling apart. So when we look at it overall, to me, option A is the one that provides a level of service that I think is most acceptable to the community and at a dollar value that we can actually afford right now. As much as our balance sheet is as strong as it's ever been, I think our infrastructure deficit, which is like off balance sheet stuff, the stuff that is due to be replaced, is in its worst position it's ever been. Yes, getting funding for the wastewater treatment plant absolutely takes a big chunk out of that. But at the end of the day, we have a lot of things that we need to pay for over the next few years, whether it's, stormwater or just the regular kind of upgrades and maintenance type items, that we need to be really cautious about how we're spending our money here. And especially when the verdict isn't out on what the final debt amount is going to be for the wastewater treatment plant, I don't see how we could in good conscience actually go out and build something now on the premise of even half of it being debt. If you got 50% covered tomorrow with a grant, we still couldn't afford the debt for half of it. It's just a matter of fact. We would have to raise property taxes 3% as a minimum right off the bat. And then the question is, what happens if the wastewater treatment plant goes over cost? Hypothetically, how can we actually bear the debt on that and then the interest on an annual basis? It would put our community in an extremely tight spot. And I just don't think that that's fair to future councils. I don't even think that's fair to the residents, because the entire community benefits from arts, culture, and heritage, whether they see it or not. However, the entire community would also be burdened if we took the wrong steps here and went farther maybe than we're able to go right now. So I think that option A provides an opportunity to get a product that is better than it is right now. It gets us out of a building that is sick. It doesn't overburden us with debt in the immediate term. It gives us, let's say, 5 to 7 to 10 years to be able to take on that debt when we see, looking at our schedule, that it appears as though there's going to be a window where you would be able to take on a little bit more, as the debt limit will continue to increase to a certain extent as well as we pay off other debts and as revenues potentially rise annually with inflation. So, there's opportunity that's going to come in a few years, but we're not there yet. We don't have the business plans that are necessary to go out and chase those grants right now. We are not shovel ready yet, as much as, it would be nice to be, but we're not shovel ready right now. And if we're to put all our eggs in those baskets, we just can't afford the debt even in the very, near term. So I don't see a scenario where that would be likely, but I think it's absolutely important that we get our ducks in a row so that if the right opportunity comes up and we are 5 years from now where the debt limit appears more manageable, that we could do something earlier rather than later. But at the end of the day, if it ends up being 10 years, we still have a product that's better than it is now for the next 10 years. And we don't have to raise property taxes 3% solely on the basis of one particular service that we offer to the community. So I think it's important that we move forward and provide an opportunity to the public to access arts and culture in a way that is better than it is now. But I also think that it's important that we don't overly burden ourselves in the near future. It would be a disservice to the entire community. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. I got Councillor Baker, followed by Councillor Buckingham. And then Councillor Fagner. Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Your Worship. Strictly from a business point of view, number one, we don't have the money. Number two, when you look at our long-range capital debt, speaks for itself. We're probably 10 years away from reducing some of those big bills that have been built up over the last few years. To me, I look at it this way. I don't think the Service Sports Center and the Day Lodge at the Bud Miller Park and all these things, turning them into some kind of a museum, make any sense at all to me. In the last couple of months, in the last month especially, I know I have and others have looked around the city trying to find potential sites that might work and gave them to administration. And believe it or not, there is decent property out there in fairly high visible locations that could support a museum of some type. It's already been said what isn't going to be there. The wildlife, the art, and the meeting rooms for day programs or whatever, I'm not sure how they run, may have to be located somewhere else. There's only about 15 schools in this town, and I'm sure with some collaboration with the school divisions, we might be able to use some empty classroom space for programs for the kids if that's what we need. But I don't know that. But I do know there's a lot of public buildings that sit empty, and some service clubs have clubhouses that might work if we need the extra space. We talk about the lease of 10 years, and certainly I hear you loud and clear. But if I was making the decision based on the feedback from the crowd, based on how I'd seen the Vic Juba Theater go, how I'd seen the multiplex go, I would do a 5 and 5. A 5-year lease with a 5-year renewal. Sure, you're taking a chance, but you can spell out the second 5 years if you like in your lease, and someone might be willing, with the right kind of building, to accept a 5 lease. The question of if you build new, that's fine, but you would have to, or I would suggest you have a referendum. in this fall when there's an election and have the public decide if they want whatever it is, 3 to 5% added to their taxes. That's what referendums are for. And to find out what the public really wants, and it shows up in the ballot. Probably it wouldn't be that great of an idea, but at least you'd know. The things that we have to do have been spoke about by Councillor Dichuk. And those are necessities, and there will be more. Things like additional sewer and water lines, who knows? We still got a major water line to run from the water treatment plant to the West Tower, water tower, and I think that was a huge number. Highway 17 redevelopment is another big ticket that isn't even on there yet. You can add those to your have-to-do list, I would suggest. Some of them have been many, many years. We solved the problem on the interim for the library with a lease in commercial space that I think it was a good choice by administration and will do a good job on the interim. The bottom line is, if you could get 10,000 square feet and find someone that knows how to design museums, not the building, but how you lay it out, how you display things. I certainly don't know a thing about it. And I'm not sure if we have the expertise, because I don't know the folks at the Bar Colony that well, but I'm sure some of them are very qualified. And how we'd go about laying out 10,000 square feet. As much as people want a new building, whether it be 15 million capital cost or 17, even 12 million, it's too much money right now, or we're going to leave the next councils in Hawk. They won't be able to do anything for another 10 years, and we'll be near our credit limits. And as Councillor Jonathan and I think Councillor Michael pointed out, we have the sewage treatment plant to deal with, and it's not built yet. We're still in the design stage. So what this move and excuse me, this move and is going to cost us. It's right now, it's our best guess. And that's all you can ask for. But hopefully it's less than we predicted. But we will see if we decide to move. And the only thing I can say is we don't have a choice. And if you're going to shut it down, that isn't a good idea. That is a bad idea. Because someone would pay the price big time. So the only thing I can see is we'll get the team out and find some commercial space that we could effectively do some renovations that don't include the things that have been deleted for the most part, even if there's only 80% of the displays. And make that interim museum work, whether it's for 5 years or 7 or 4 or 10, I don't know. But I think that's what you should be looking at. Thank you for your time, Your Worship. It's gone dead.
My apologies, Executive Manager Stan.
Yeah, I just wanted to provide some context into what we'd be looking for if option A was provided for direction by council. We would put out an RFP to the community looking for lease space. We would have requirements on location as well as minimum square footage. What we've done with our manager of the Culture and Science Center, Director of Culture and Recreation, they've looked at space allocation, and the minimum space requirement is 11,000 square feet. If we go below that, we will be now starting to reduce what this option is being proposed to include. So a minimum would be 11,000 and the RFP would go up to probably as high as 15,000 square feet. So we'd be looking for buildings in those ranges and applied on other various factors that will be identified in the RFP.
Thank you. Councillor Baker.
Just one question. We would like 15,000 square feet or 11 or 12, but if we can only afford 10, maybe we only display 80% of the goods and revolve it. What we want and what we can get sometimes is a different story. Thank you.
I appreciate that, Councillor, and I think that's why we'll leave it to administration to, after we give them some direction, to see what they bring back, because whatever comes back will need to likely come back to council for the approval of the lease, I would suspect. So I think there's the weighting of the two sides, absolutely.
Yeah, cost would be one factor, or the lease rate would be a factor. The amount of size is a factor,
sure.
Location. We'll bring forward, so after that RFP closes and the evaluation would be completed, that would be something we would bring back to council and show you all those options.
Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you.
On to Councillor Buckingham, and I've got Councillor Fagnan.
Thank you, Worship. I would concur with most everything that's being said. Councillor Torreson had a really good summary of all of my thoughts as well. I just want to take it back just a little bit to February, where this council asked for more public feedback and more input. And I think, you know, we're debating all the very important points of how we're going to move forward, what we're going to do, what we're going to look like. But I think I'd be remiss if I didn't take an opportunity here to thank the community for stepping up. You know, the feedback that we received, emails, phone calls, texts, face-to-face meetings, everything else that went with it, to me, really shows the drive of this community and leads me to believe that we can do things like we've done in the past with the Vic Juba Community Theatre, the Service Sports Center, all of those things. There's going to be a decision today. That decision is not going to make everybody happy, and there's no way it can. But for me, I am thrilled with the community outpouring, the community's input, the community's thought. Some of the stuff that came forward to us was really deep dive was taken by people to really consider things that we should look at, their thoughts, they communicated their feelings about it. And that's what we asked for in February as a council, was to get that feedback, and the community stepped up. And my hat's off to everybody in the community that took the time to do that, filling out the surveys, submitting all their things, because in what I hate to say it, what I would consider a no-win situation, not everybody's going to be happy, not everybody's going to win. The win in all of this for me is our community and what the community did and what the community brought forward. I just wanted to take the time to thank everybody for that, because it shouldn't go unnoticed.
Thanks, Councillor. Well said. Councillor Fagnan.
Well, I think there's a song about this. Aaron just took the words right out of my mouth. And that was my, you know, I wanted to commend, you know, all the stakeholders, the whole community for banding together like that. I would expect nothing less, and I know that it did have an impact, and it just shows that you know, good things can happen when you let people know and you're able to communicate. And I thank my fellow councillors as well for you know, for their thoughts and listening to all this. Certainly, I take a look back. I spent a number of hours talking with various stakeholders within the museum, and I think that you know, they've been the forgotten child for a number of years. There's been lots of promises made over the years, and not necessarily gone through with. And I think that, you know, option A seems to be a win-win for everybody. And certainly, if we had the finances and didn't have a water treatment plant and a fire station to build, it would be a different story. But we have to make the most of what we've got. And I think that option A, the ones that people I've spoken with, if they would be very satisfied in order if that was selected today. So again, thank you very much for the public for all their input and efforts. Well done.
Thanks, Council. I think City Manager.
Mayor Albers, the other one that we'd want to, along with no matter which option we select, is the current state of the building as well. And as part of Don's or the A and B motions that are forwarded is also a date determined by council for the existing building. And so that discussion should happen as well. And we all know there's a number of issues with the building. There's been talk about you know, a farewell tour, a farewell weekend, or a number of different things. I guess looking for we obviously know there's mechanical issues. There's a few other things that Don would probably better talk about than myself, but just looking for that as part of the discussion as well, to allow us to formulate that direction as well, not only for the, is it related to COVID? Is it related, to 4.2? Is it permanent closure today? Is it, a predetermined date of September 1st, September 30th, something like that? So I guess, Don, is there anything, maybe talk about the risk and reward of both areas?
Yeah, just to, I know I've had some feedback from the facility manager. I think from their perspective, they'd like to see the facility open when it can after COVID until the September or Labor Day weekend. There are implications to that, obviously, and we're all well aware of those. The HVAC unit is about ready to shut down. There's been some water damage and things, walls opened up. Sounds like the staff have taken some of those into consideration, but those are what we're looking for council to provide direction on as to how and when that facility closes. Obviously, the administration, we have reviewed and looked at places to move the archives on a temporary basis until this new lease space would be available. Obviously, they would move into the space with everybody else. And we do have considered a temporary location for the programming. And then our cleaning and deaccession of that facility would continue on until a new space is available. Which would be, when that new space is available, would be determined through the RFP process. That would be one of the factors we'd be looking at there as well. So I hope that provides some clarity. I would suggest that if there were any costs required to continue that opening, so for example, if that HVAC unit went, that the facility would be closed anyway in regards to that. So I'll pass it back to you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Torreson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, this part for me is very difficult because, part of it was what my concern was with the build it now option is if we didn't go with option A and put all our eggs in the basket of trying to chase grant funds right now and trying to fundraise right now for something is the fear that we would have no kind of options or opportunities. And the part I'm having a difficult time with is what do we do right now as soon as, we have the option of opening this facility again? Like if we're under the understanding that the building is not well and it's on its kind of last legs, how do we in good conscience continue to have staff in there or to have members of the public enter? And I'm really struggling with it. Like I think that we want to protect our staff and the public as much as possible. And if there's things, HVAC units ready to fail, there's consistently, leaks whenever there's rain and stuff like that, which just means that there's other problems in that building, some of which are detailed in reports that we have. I'm just having a difficult time with saying, yes, we should open it, or even as we're trying to RFP the option A option, that we shouldn't be looking for a way to provide some of these services in the very, very interim. I know option A is looked at the short to medium term, but in the very, very short term, like the rest of this year, is there opportunity to do something in that time? And what Executive Manager Stang is kind of saying is that they've got some contingency plans in place, and for me, I think we pursue them and try and keep that facility closed.
Yeah, I just want to comment there, Your Worship, too. As we deaccession and move things out, like some staff are going to need to be there for a while to deaccession. If the facility was closed, today, for example, we would be taking some time till we got the programming in the archives into a different space, and then our collection staff into Studio 2. So that would need to be fit up versus, delaying that for a time being, allow, what Dion talked about, an event, last showing event, or staying open until September. Those options are all on the table, and obviously they there's risk in doing that. We do have a facility that leaks every time it rains. We do have walls open. We do have you know, issues with our HVAC units. My biggest issue there is we can't, if we're moving away from that building and moving everybody else, it doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense to invest more money into it for you know, a short couple months. So,
Councillor Monroe.
Yeah, I think that what Councillor Thorson had to say are all valid points. And I personally believe that, you know, if the building is in that imminent shape that we need to close it, I don't really foresee opening it back up for a few months. If the risks are the HVAC unit's not working, water usually means mold, right? And so I'm not saying that there is, but just there's those other potential risks for both the people visiting the facility and our people that we're going to be having in there. So I don't know if any of the risks really mitigate having it open for that interim time. I would rather see us looking at alternative measures while we're pursuing whatever option that we do take, rather than reopening up the facility. We've told the public that, you know, we need to close this building, that it's at end of life. And I don't know that opening it up for a few months in the interim is really the messaging that's appropriate to begin. I don't know if it's a mixed message that we'll be sending to the community. So,
Councillor Diachuk.
Thanks, Your Worship. Well, I appreciate this latter part of the discussion here. I think we're getting ahead of ourselves, and we should get back to focusing on what the motion is about. Are we going A, B, or C? And once that motion is in place, all these other pieces will be addressed. As I said, some of these pieces we're not in control of, and others we are. But I think we're wandering away from what I think is the core of the decision and discussion, which is which option we're going to choose. So I think it's important to sort of bring things back in here.
Appreciate that. Appreciate that. Is there any further discussion on 6.4.3 from the perspective of the cultural options that we have for the LCSC? Councillor Baker.
Your Worship, I hear what Councillor Diachuk is saying, but there's another side to that story. If people don't understand what's really happening, it should be discussed before you make the decision, and what we're going to do with the new building and how it's going to work and all these sorts of things. You don't just say, well, we're going to move and figure out later how we're going to make it work. So I don't totally agree with Michael on this one, but I think the debate was good. It can give the perspective of His Worship and Council, and certainly feedback from the administration. And we've all come to the conclusion there's going to be a lot of work to do once we make the decision. But I do appreciate we had this conversation so that we can open up the doors for everybody to understand what's going on. I know I learned some things today, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further discussion? With that, I will look for direction from Council on 6.4.3, the Lloydminster Cultural and Science Center LCSC options. Councillor Diachuk.
All right. Move that Council direct administration to proceed with the recommendation as approved during February 24, 2020 regular Council meeting, motion number 50-2020, that Council direct administration negotiate lease rates on a 10-year term for a facility that provides space for the temporary relocation of the Lloydminster Culture and Science Center.
Thank you, Councillor. Seconder, Councillor Baker. Thank
question
you.
In Your Worship.
I just need to get a seconder and then I'll take a question.
Your Worship, before you get a seconder, there's three portions of that motion that need to be read in conjunction with number one.
Oh,
let's do them all.
Just
Okay.
let me stop for a second here. I understood from maybe I misunderstood when I talked to the city clerk. You wanted 4 motions. Is that?
Well, I see 3 actually. Yeah.
Or 3, I should say. City clerk, is that where are we all looking for 1 motion or for 3 motions?
That was my understanding, but if we'd like to combine them, if that's what the executive manager would like, then that's.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't know you had that conversation. I wanted to make sure all motions were getting addressed. So whether that's in one or three separate motions, I'm good either way, Your Worship. I'll leave that to you to make that
Okay,
decision.
thank you. Councillor Baker.
Yeah, Your Worship, that's what I was going to ask, because if you agree with one, you don't necessarily concur with A and B, or point 1,
Okay.
2, and 3 at this time.
Oh, I see what you're saying, that we bet if we're gonna do, if we're gonna do it all as one, and go from
I
there.
could keep reading.
If that's Councillor Buckingham.
Just a quick question. Did we get a seconder?
That's
Not
what I was gonna bring up here. We need a seconder, Your Worship, to the first motion, or
Okay, if
Yeah,
that's
we need
what
a
we're gonna
seconder
go with.
so we can discuss it.
Okay, seconded by Councillor Buckingham. So I guess that from that perspective, there's two thoughts to this. So we can put this all into one motion. That's no question about it. And the city clerk and I talked about, we could have separate motions for each of the points from that perspective. Councillor Buckingham.
Thank you, Worship. Yeah, I would be in favor of having the motion separated, but first of all, I just wondered on the wording on the first one. We talked about it. We talked about potential for doing something different in the lease. So the wording of the motion is to move on a 10-year term. But can we have it say something to the effect of up to a 10-year term, so that we're not saying 10-year term? Is that an appropriate amendment?
I believe it is, and I'll look to the mover. Councillor Diachuk, would you accept a friendly amendment?
Yeah, I'm not sure what the intent is, because if you make a 10-year term, obviously it can't be 11, and the option would always be available to say if you want to open the lease up to 11 or 15 or more than that. So I'm sort of wondering which way you're going, because the other part, it's important to note that is that this reflects that original motion that was made back in February as well. So I'm not sure where what the intent is. Sorry, Aaron.
That's okay. My intent would be to not lock us into something 10 years. So 7 years down the road, we're not paying a penalty to get out. For example, if we found the fundraising and everything else came together, I just didn't want it to lock us in at a 10-year term if we had the option to negotiate up to a 10-year term.
Your Worship, if I may.
I just want to make sure Councillor Diachuk understands that.
No, I understand that, but I guess the other part of it is that I get that part of it. My sense, though, I guess, as I was hearing Executive Director Stang say, is that being able to get a rate for a 5-year term is going to be different than for a 7-year term than for a 10-year term. So if we're looking at getting a preferable rate, that was the discussion that we entered in back in February around establishing a 10-year term, because we'd get a good rate. I believe that any of those leases will have a buyout clause for that can be negotiated into it as well.
Yeah, and I'm 100% behind that. That's all good. Whichever way it goes, I agree with you. It's just that it says in there on a 10-year term. Still think it should have up to 10-year. So I mean, I fully trust the administration to negotiate the lease, but I just wonder if the wording shouldn't be up to in the motion.
Councillor Baker, you have a comment, and then I'll get to the executive manager.
Yes, I certainly do. Your Worship, I think we should only be dealing whether we're going to lease some new lease space, or we're going to move to the Service Support Center or build a new building. That's what it's about. We're getting to notice all this other stuff. When you call for your RFP, you can spell out in your RFP when you want. And I said in my little dissertation a while ago, we should look at a 5-year with a 5-year renewal. Or you can make it 6 and 4. When people's buildings are empty, they're pretty open to negotiations. But I don't think we should be dealing with all this other stuff other than the one motion. So if we're moving out, they can start doing whatever they have to do at the existing building, and Don can get going with his team and looking for some space. And then when we find that space and we get it organized, then we can talk about the other things we're going to do. That's what I believe. This is too much stuff in one motion by far. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. I'll address that in a second. City Clerk.
Yeah, just so Council's clear, we have a motion on the table. We've had a request for a friendly amendment to it, which has been declined. So we have to deal with that motion on the table before we move to any other motion.
Yeah. I just put it. I didn't decline it. I want an explanation, Doug. So I mean, So read back what the amendment would be. Sorry, Doug.
Well, I don't have the amendment, but if Councillor Buckingham would allow me, I believe what he wants to say is the council direct administration to negotiate lease rates on an up to 10-year term for the facility. I believe, is that what he'd like?
Yeah, I think that's what he's asking.
Councillors or Executive Manager Stang wants to weigh in on that with a comment on the potentials.
Executive Manager Stang?
My only question for City Clerk is then, does that motion number 50-2020 need to be rescinded?
Yep.
Probably,
That's
yes.
the question.
Okay.
Could I, if I could make a suggestion, I think what we have there is appropriate, and the city council always has an option to go back and say, you know, okay, 10 years not going to work because we can get a better deal at 5 and 5. You're going to make decisions based on lease rates, so you can always go back and say, you know what, we're going to change the lease. We made it based on information we have. I think we're trying to lock in an outcome that is we don't know yet, and I think, you know what, it's, you know, we delayed going forward with this motion or only to get the input, but the discussion and intent around it was a financial decision saying it's not reasonable to build. There may not be extra space available where we think, you know, would work in Service Sports Center. So I mean, if the council can live with up to a 10-year term, I'm okay with that. But I think, you know, in the end, the final lease comes back to council for approval, and we can always approve what's in the best interest for the city.
Councillor Buckingham, would you withdraw your friendly amendment?
Or no, I'm saying he can leave it in there, but then we have to go back and revote, you know.
Yeah, I guess it's one of two. We can carry we can move the vote on the motion that's existing, or withdraw the friendly amendment, and or we do stay with the friendly amendment, and then we'll have to go back and rescind the other motion. So I'll look to Councillor Buckingham. Go ahead.
Well, thanks, Your Worship. It's a good point. I mean, that lease is going to come back to City Council for approval regardless. So, you know, looking at it from that direction, I think we're fine to withdraw the suggestion.
Okay, so we're back to the original motion that is on the floor. That was moved by Councillor Diachuk and still seconded by Councillor Buckingham. Any further discussion? Not seeing any. All in favor?
Thank you, Your Worship.
Opposed? Carried. So we have no, I heard what Councillor Baker said, and I just want to address that, Councillor Baker, for 2 and 3. There's items in 3 in particular that this council needs to give administration direction on to move forward to accommodate some of the goals that we want. And I hear what you're saying, that you may not all be pertinent, but I think in most cases, all of 3 is pertinent from that perspective. If after item number 1, number 2, I guess we don't have to give council or administration direction, but we do have to give them some direction on where to go with that building, because it is a public building, and they will need some direction on that from that perspective. So that was my thinking behind that when we brought it forward in 3 motions. Is that, City Manager, does that make sense? Am I on the right track?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, either way, we need direction on all 3 items. Either way, no matter what today, and 1 and 3 for sure. Number 2, we'd like direction today for sure on that one, but I guess, yeah, we need to proceed on all of them if we can.
Councillor Baker.
Well, Your Worship, on point 5 under number 3, it says we're going to spend $1,444,000. That's just a guesstimate. Am I reading the right report? It's the one on the screen.
It's the you're right. It's the addition that will be read into item 3. That is the. It's giving. That allows them to, I believe, for the renovation. Is that Executive Manager Stang where that money would be allocated to?
Yeah, that was our estimate for option A, and obviously those were estimated costs. They were done by a local contractor, albeit on a space that may or may not be the ultimate lease space chosen. But what that essentially does is provides funding for the project. So we've estimated around 1.4 million. to fit up the space. This gives us the funding from that capital reserve general government account number 1700-130-35110 to fund this project. Obviously, everything would be procured, and we would be following procurement policy there, and anything over our threshold would come to council for consideration.
Councillor Baker, does that answer your question?
No, it doesn't, Your Worship.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't.
Okay, what?
It's just a number.
Yep.
We don't even know what the building looked like. And we got a
Your
price
Worship,
of 1.4 million. Like, it doesn't make any sense, but we have voted and it's all over and you've made your decision and go for it.
Well, we haven't on the rest of the motion, Councillor, on the addition. Councillor Diachak.
Yeah, I see what Councillor Baker's saying, and actually I don't think that it's appropriate to have that capital cost requirement be brought in there because it supposes that, you know, that we already have an idea of what a lease of a building is, and leasing a building is only one option. So that final statement really doesn't have a place in it, I don't think.
Okay. So
does that make sense?
Giving your high card away.
Yeah, I don't think that needs to be included in the motion.
Okay.
Because if you do the RFP and you have something come back where someone says, well, actually, I have this building and it may cost less, or this building and it may cost more, or I don't know the relevancy of that at this point. That there's an assumption behind that amount. And I understand that it's important to know that it could cost this much, but that assumption is built upon an existing building or a lease that's available somewhere. And that may not be the final choice.
Okay. So I had Councillor Fagnan, I'll get Executive Manager Stang, and then Councillor Torreson.
Yeah, I guess.
Go ahead, Councillor.
I would agree with both Councillor Baker and Diachak on that final figure there. I think that we need to work on that and that it not be included in there. And then secondly, I think that we need to have a little bit more discussion on item number 2. We had a little bit of discussion here today, but I think that we need to look further into that and come up with a plan on exactly when we're going to be closing and what happens to staff in between, and you know, all those different factors. So I think that number 2 might be a little bit premature, and beyond with some more discussion, come up with a motion that would address that in a more fact-based find.
Okay. I had Executive Manager Stang, and then I'll get to Councillor Torreson.
Yeah, at the end of the day, council can make a determination whether they want to allocate those reserve funds towards this project today or at another date. I just wanted to provide context. So that was the funds there aren't tied to the lease rate. That would be included in the operating cost. So the 1.4 isn't tied to us securing the lease. Motion number 1 allows us to do that, and obviously that would come back to council for consideration. What that capital fund was to do is to renovate the lease space. So once a lease space has been entered into in a lease agreement, we're going to have to do some work there, and again, that cost was provided to us based on a space we were looking at prior to February 24th, and we had an estimate in order to fit that up from a local contractor. We had some funding, 12,000 allocated to fit up the Saskatchewan Tourism Building, to move our staff out into that space so that they can start working out of there and start working on the collections. We had costs in there for moving. That was to move the archives into temporary, well, sir, I apologize. The moving cost is to move the LCSC exhibits and everything over into the new space. But if you look at the additional cost, there's some additional funding to move the archives to a temporary location, as well as moving the OTS display artifacts that need to be or would be moved to the college. So that allocates fundings for those. It also had some funding allocation or an estimated cost, and this was provided right out of the Cornerstone report. $300,000 to build our own Lloydminster artifact display within the new space. So that again is a cost estimate, and then facility signage. Those are all what build up the 1.4 million. So it's not tied to the lease rental space that would be allocated in the operating. This is to allow us to start moving forward on some of these other things and have funding allocated to those. Again, above our authority, administration authority, so the construction costs to renovate the lease space and the artifact, that would ultimately be put through our procurement policy, and that would come back to council for approval.
Thank you.
So I hope that adds clarity, Your Worship.
Councillor Thorson.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. To be honest with my other members of council, I just professionally disagree on this item. And that's because I believe that administration, we know that whatever we rent is going to cost something from a capital perspective to get the space with the right spots ready to use. It's going to need special HVAC that is not necessarily your standard HVAC systems. We know that. We know that we're going to need signage. We know we're going to need to do some of those other things. And I think it's important so that they can look at the different lease options, apples to apples, and say, all right, this is what we need to do with this lease. This is the amount of capital we would need to spend in this lease, to give them some parameters to work within so they can get somewhere. Because otherwise, we're going to spin our wheels. We're not going to get anywhere. You're going to add an extra 6 months to whatever the plan was to get it into a new space. And yeah, I don't see the value in waiting. I understand not having all your T's crossed and I's dotted when you're signing off on that amount of money, but we know what a significant portion of that is, and it's going to be HVAC systems. We know that they need to be able to do certain things. We know that there's going to be certain displays we want to create. So I think giving them some parameters to work within will actually expedite the process. And it is not allocated right now in our budget, and this allocates budget. Does this actually fall, or this isn't the process for actually approving spending, because that comes at a later date, but this allocates budget. And I think that it's important that we do it now so that we're not spinning our wheels and coming back here in 2 months once we have a better idea of which lease space it is. We just know that they got 1.4 million to work with to get a bunch of that stuff done. Thank you.
City Manager.
Yes, and I would agree with that, Councillor. And maybe where some of the confusion is that we've got 1.5 in the report and we got 1.444780 in the motion. And so if Council wanted to be consistent with the report, we could put $1.5 million to be allocated to the project. But I do think it's important. It's no different than setting our budget in December. It gives us parameters to work around, as Councillor Thorson said. The other one is on number 2. I would suggest we don't have much time to make that decision, because if we wait till the middle of July, we're already through. We have no direction for our staff to plan. If we did decide to open, COVID, non-COVID related issues, we need some planning to move forward on that. So at the end of the day, with number 2, we're either we're taking the risk with staying open with and opening at under 4.2 of the COVID reopen plan with the knowledge that our building's not in great shape, or we take a risk and open with and have last chance or last weekend or whatever open till September 1st, whatever that looks like. So I think it's important we have that direction today.
Thank you, City Manager. I would agree. And I think that regarding item number 2 as presented, the building has got issues, and I'm afraid that I think we have to move forward, and the building is closed. It's closed, and we move forward. We know, because if we open it on a weekend or open it and it starts to rain, people are going to be disappointed. It was supposed to be open, the roof leaks, things like that. That's what we've told people already. It is leaking. I would certainly support that it is closed, and let administration bring forward a plan to because it will have to be budgeted for 2021 or 2022, whenever the budget for that demolition. So moving forward. So Councillor Diachuk.
Yeah, I was going to add, Your Worship, that, in the motion it says, they're to come back with the plan, and it's determined as per council's direction. So all this does is say, let's get a plan, go talk to the people, find out what's going to work, come back, and we look at the options, and we move forward at that point.
I would entertain that motion if you were so interested.
Okay, I'll do that one. I move that council approve the request by administration to permanently close and plan for the decommissioning and demolition of the Lloydminster Cultural and Science Center building located at 4515 44th Street, Lloydminster, Saskatchewan, with the date to be determined as per council's direction.
Seconder, Councillor Buckingham. Thank you. Any further discussion on the question? Not seeing any. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, Council. Item number 3, the council for direction.
All right, I can make that motion, and at the suggestion of the city manager, I'll change the numbers to reflect 1.5 million, so that just consistency.
Right.
Move that council direct administration to number 1, procure for commercial lease premises and its construction. Number 2, relocate Lloydminster Archives and programming until space in the commercial lease premises is constructed and commissioned. Number 3, set up the Saskatchewan Tourism Building. Number 4, adhere to the Museum Collections Management Policy number 761-01 as it pertains to the LCSC permanent displays. And number 5, negotiate the termination of the IMHOP contract. In addition, that the capital cost requirement to relocate to commercial lease premises in the amount of 1.5 million be funded to the Capital Reserve Government Account number 1-700-130-35110.
Thank you, Councillor. Seconder, Councillor Monroe. Any further discussion, Council? Councillor Baker.
Your worship, it says in the motion, capital cost.
It does, so that the intention of that money is for capital items, Councillor Baker, namely the renovations of the building.
Well, Dr. Don said it was for more than that. I'm confused, but that's all right.
No, but let's make sure we're clear. So the renovations to the Saskatchewan Tourism Building would be a capital cost. The fitting up of a sign for a new facility would be a capital cost. I imagine the moving cost, I don't know how that was determined as a capital cost, the executive manager saying.
Yeah, it was an estimate. We thought if our own resources couldn't do that, we would need to hire an external contractor to come in. So we put an estimate in there for what that moving cost might be. So
okay,
if we're hiring somebody to come as part of the project, that would be a capital cost.
So that would be the only, I'd call variable cost, Councillor Baker. The rest of them are, I believe, are all capital items that be it from that perspective. Does that make sense?
What motion do we have on the books now?
The motion that we're debating right now is that council direct administration, known as, it's item number 3 on your agenda, Councillor Baker.
No, but before that, number 1, what did number 1 read? I'm sorry.
Number 1, I can read back. That is for council to direct administration to proceed with the recommendation as approved during the February 24th, 2020 regular council meeting, motion number 50-2020, that council direct administration to negotiate lease rates on a 10-year term for a facility that will provide space for the temporary relocation of the Lloydminster Cultural and Science Center. That was the first motion. Just that item.
Was that amended?
No, it wasn't. That was left for 10 years for the lease to be negotiated by administration.
So what you're telling the public is you're going to have it there for 10 years?
We have the potential to be there for 10 years, Councillor. We don't have a lease and we don't have a building. So we've given administration some direction, and I'm sure administration has heard the sentiments discussed around the table and will bring back the best option they can for us.
We have a motion on the table on motion 3, Your Worship.
Thank you, City Clerk. Did I get a seconder?
Yes, you did.
Okay. Any further discussion on motion number 3 regarding the LCSC? If not, I'll call for the question. All in favor?
Thank you, Worship.
Carried. Thank you very much, Council. I know this is there's a lot of moving parts to this, and I know that administration will keep us informed as they move forward on the process, being first the RFP, looking for some new space.
Thank you very much for your direction today, Council.
Thank you very much, Executive Manager Stang, and the work that your team has put into that. Moving on to 6.0, I believe I had Councillor Monroe. Oh, we'll get you turned on. 1 second.
Just a motion for a quick 5-minute recess.
Certainly. Seconder? Counselor Diachuk. All in favor?
Thank you, Your Worship.
Recess. I've got 3:36, so we'll be back at 3:41. Thank you very much.
So for the last couple of years, the City of Lloydminster landfill has been recycling clean untreated wood and repurposing it for use as landfill cover and also as an equipment pad. We have a stockpile of just under 9,000 cubic meters of clean and treated wood. We issued an RFP to process the material, and we have received 2 proposals. Out of the 2 proposals, Mulchco Limited received the highest score. The rated capacity of Mulchco's equipment allows them to complete the work within 7 days compared to the other proposal from GFL, which will complete the work for in 2 to 3 weeks. Their ability for a quicker completion date not only puts us in line with a better schedule, but it also reduces the impact on landfill's day-to-day operations, to safety, and also to the interruption to public access to the clean wood stockpile. Mulchco also highlighted measures for dust control that will be implemented as part of this project, and these measures will minimize the impact to landfill operations and to the public. So as mentioned, Mulchco received the overall highest overall technical scores, although their work, or I guess their cost is slightly over than GFL. We would recommend awarding the contract to Mulchco because it will provide the least impact to landfill operations, to safety, and to public.
Thank you, Karen. Questions or comments from council? Karen, have we used Mulchco in the past?
No, sir, we haven't. However, we have contacted all of their references, including a couple of larger landfills and composting facilities, and their work had been vetted by those references.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Baker.
Your worship, there is a fair difference in price. How did you determine that again? I mean, I see the scoreboard, I see that, but for the difference, how did you do that?
So the difference in price is determined by the unit rate. So we had asked both companies to provide a unit rate per cubic meter, and we had looked at our historical volumes for the wood that we process or the wood that we receive on an annual basis. So that's where we determined the total contract price.
The GFL, were they going to take 1 more day or 1 more week?
They were going to take anywhere between 1 to 2 more weeks to process the materials that we have. 1 to 2 weeks, an additional 1 to 2 weeks.
Okay, I missed that on your original. Yeah, I understand now. Thank you.
So, thank you. Go ahead, Karen. I was just going to ask, then, is this annually for the next 3 years? Is that what we're looking at, or?
No, Your Worship. So we only mobilize our wood recycling contractor when we have enough material to crush. Okay. Based on our historical tonnages, we anticipate that we will be crushing in 2020, and we will also be crushing our wood bean in 2023.
So, okay, so this would actually cover two services provided, or 2 service times by the contractors, what you're proposing.
That's correct, Your Worship.
Okay. Because I remember dealing with this, I think, when shortly after we got elected, that someone was awarded this process either in 2016, 2017. Does that sound right?
That's correct, Your Worship.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments? And I guess last question, Karen, based on, so that's an estimated cost based on the tonnage moved through. So the price that they're proposing for 2020, is that stick to 2023, or is there a factor in there that they've allowed for potential inflation?
They have provided us basically the same price for both 2020 and 2023.
Okay. Okay. And was that the same with GFL as well?
GFL had accounted for additional cost in 2023.
Okay. Nope. So if we settle with Mulchco, that contract would cover right through to 2023.
That's correct, Your Worship.
Okay. Any other questions of council? Not seeing any. I will look for direction on 6.5.1 wood recycling services contract award. Councillor Buckingham.
Move the council award the contract for wood recycling services to Mulchco Limited of Stony Plain, Alberta for a period of 3 years, 2020 to 2023, as per proposed rates in Mulchco Limited submission dated May 22nd, 2020, at an estimated contract cost of $268,501.33, excluding GST, and in addition that the mayor and city clerk be authorized to sign and seal all necessary documents.
Thank you. I'll look for a seconder. Councillor Monroe. Any further discussion before I call for the question? Not seeing any. All in favor?
Thank you, Your Worship.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, Karen. Moving on to 6.5.2, I'll look to the city manager, and I believe Councillor Torreson, you were stepping out for 6.5.2. Thank you. I'll send you a text when we're able to bring you back in. City manager. I'll turn it
Thank
over
you, Worship. So for 6.5.2 capital infrastructure MEEP, additional project funding allocation, I'll ask James Rogers to present.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Can you hear me clear?
We can, James. Thank you very much. Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you. So before you is the capital infrastructure or MEEP additional project funding allocation. The recommendation before you is that Council approve administration to submit the application for the Municipal Economic Enhancement Program or MEEP funding in the amount of $1,690,965 toward the concrete intersection construction at 44th Street and 62nd Avenue project. In addition, that Council direct administration to request the additional $969,035 required to complete the concrete intersection construction project within the 2021 capital budget. The MEEP is a program intended to provide per capita funding to municipalities to support investments in infrastructure within two main objectives: stimulating economic recovery and encouraging local job creation. The MEEP funding must be incurred by March 31st of 2022. Administration reviewed the funding agreement and determined that surface works improvements or programs that have surface works components, style programs for criteria for critical infrastructure improvements would provide the maximum per capita positive effect to residents, would stimulate economic recovery and encourage local job creation. As such, administration reviewed targeted areas throughout the city of Lloydminster where additional funding for capital infrastructure improvements would provide maximum benefit with respect to the completion of a capital program. The top three priority projects provided by administration are as follows. So we have the concrete intersection construction at 44th Street and 62nd Avenue, the water and sewer replacement program on 50th Street between 52nd Avenue and 54th Avenue, as well as 40th Avenue reconstruction between 52nd Street or north of the railroad tracks to 67th Street, including the intersection. Additional project information, including cost breakdowns, project descriptions, the estimated schedule, and more in-depth project rationale can be found within our attached briefing note. With that, I will turn it back to Mayor and Council for any questions you may have.
Thanks very much, James. Questions or comments from Council? Councillor Diachuk.
Yep, thanks very much, Your Worship. So, James, I'm just thinking of the project, and so when right now, 44th and 67th is a bit of a roller coaster ride in there now. So, when you talk about concrete intersection construction, can you sort of describe a little bit more what'll happen in that area?
Yes, thank you for your question. So, essentially, what we're doing is what the title is. We will be looking to repair all of the underground infrastructure. The water, sewer, and the storm sewer to bring it up to current standards, new material, so that we can get a life cycle out of it or a lifespan. But then we will be turning the asphalt into a concrete pad. So the concrete stopping blocks that we have along Highway 16, we would implement that at this intersection, but we would also do through the intersection so that it's not just the stopping blocks. It would be the stopping blocks and the middle of the intersection in all four directions.
So basically, the whole square, if you like, would be all concrete then?
Absolutely. And then we
Okay.
would look to extend approximately 100 meters out from the intersection in the approaching direction.
Okay, so that's the north-south portion of it then.
So we would look to do 100 meters to the north, 100 meters to the south, as well as 100 meters to the east and 100 meters to the west.
Wow, okay.
If there was one intersection, I'm afraid, that gets more heavy traffic than any other in this city, it's likely 44th and 62nd.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, sorry.
No problem. Go ahead, Councillor.
No, I was going to say, I mean, the people I've talked to about it just said, what's the plan? What are they doing? This is insane. When are they going to fix it? I mean, so, I mean, yeah, it needs work.
It needs work. Any other questions of James? So James, it's in the brief, but I think it's important that people hear where this money, the MEEP money, is coming from. Would you like to just share where that money is coming from a grant program?
Yes, so on May 6th of 2020, Premier Scott Moe announced the Municipal Economic Enhancement Program for 2020, or the MEEP. And as I said, the program will provide per capita funding to municipalities to support investments in infrastructure, to stimulate economic recovery, and encourage local job creation.
Thank you. So this was something that was lobbied very much by municipalities of Saskatchewan, with the government of Saskatchewan in the current economic conditions we're in. So what the province responded by is a per capita. So each community, municipality in Saskatchewan will receive MEEP funding based out of $151 million pool, and I appreciate 1.69 million is a piece of a good chunk of road work that we're looking at, if that's what we choose, or other work that could substantially improve the city and help to address some of the very infrastructure discussions we've had earlier today and shortfalls in our city. So I certainly appreciate the government of Saskatchewan coming forward with this. And I believe this would be an excellent opportunity to make the streets smoother in our city and improve the traffic flow at that intersection. Any other comments that anyone has? City
Mayor,
Manager.
over just in the motion, it does state it, but just to reaffirm that this does commit this project to the 2021 budget. So there's an additional money outside of the 1.669 million that is being allocated, that based on this budget will be would be attributed to the 2021 budget. Just to make sure that's clear to council.
Thank you, City Manager. I appreciate that. I think that as the council is going into an election, it's never nice to commit someone to a project, but I would hope that the residents of this city and business people that travel over that intersection every day, sometimes more than once, would appreciate that that's good value for taxation money going forward in 2021 as well. If there's no other comments from council, I'll look for direction on 6.5.2, please. Councillor Buckingham.
Move the council approve administration to submit the application for the Municipal Economic Enhancement Program, or MEEP, funding in the amount of $1,690,965 toward the concrete intersection construction at 44th Street and 62nd Avenue project. In addition, the council direct administration to request the additional $969,035 required to complete the concrete intersection construction project in the 2021 capital budget.
Thank you, Councillor. Seconder? Councillor Fagnan, thank you very much. Any further discussion, council, before I call for the question? Not seeing any. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, James. And I believe through the city manager, you're back up on 6.5.3, so please continue.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Before you is the Central Business District Replacement Program, Consulting Services, and Buying Group Utilization. So before your two recommendations, and they are as follows. The first is that council approve the use of buying groups and group purchasing organizations, or GPOs, utilizing Central Source, or formerly known as Summa Advantage, to secure the services of a qualified engineering consultant to complete engineering detailed design and project pre-planning on behalf of the City of Lloydminster associated with the Central Business District Replacement Program Planning and Design Project, project number 2013-604. and that council authorize the administration to procure the goods and services required through Central Source for the Central Business District Replacement Program planning and design up to the approved capital budget of $300,000 be allocated from the 2020 capital budget project number 20136604, and that the mayor and city clerk be authorized to sign and seal all necessary documents. With procurement and purchasing methods developing, the use of buying groups or group purchasing organizations is evolving and becoming more prominent when municipalities are purchasing goods and services. Administration is eager to pilot the use of these platforms to determine what advantages or disadvantages may come from using these types of groups. Within the most recent procurement and purchasing policy, policy number 120-05, the use of these groups was approved. However, these platforms have not been utilized for engineering consulting services to date, and as such will be piloted by engineering services. The objective of the Central Business District Replacement Program Planning and Design Project is to complete the preliminary detailed design and project pre-planning associated with replacing and upgrading aging municipal infrastructure and surface works rehabilitation within the Central Business District, specifically 44th Street to 52nd Street and between 49th Avenue and 51 Avenue. The current processes in place associated with securing engineering or consulting services has proven itself to be effective and efficient. However, with the increased number of buying groups, administration is seeing potential opportunities to streamline the process while adhering to the applicable policies and procedures while maximizing project value. The current practice would be to create a request for proposal, and that would be a request for proposal document, issue the document to open market, and then receive proposal submissions. This process can be time-consuming, costly, and potentially increase the number of scope changes and additional costs during the project due to the formalness of the current process and formalness of the bidding process. The use of buying groups or group purchasing organizations still allows administration to adhere to the policies and procedures, and to note Central Source is trade agreement compliant and procure services on a less formal platform. To determine the possible advantages or disadvantages available for municipalities, administration is seeking approval to use the Central Business District Replacement Program Planning and Design Project as a pilot project to secure the services of an engineering consultant through the Central Source platform. Key performance indicators, including project efficiencies, procurement efficiencies, potential cost savings, and other indicators will be included, will be monitored by administration throughout the process in an effort to finalize as a decision regarding the overall use of buying groups to procure these services. All procurement will be completed in accordance with the procurement and purchasing policy. In particular, a minimum of 3 quotations will be solicited. With that, I'll turn it back over to Mayor and Council for any questions or comments they may have.
Thank you very much, James. Questions? Councillor Diachak.
Thanks, Your Worship. I guess I really think there's a lot of advantages to going through this sort of group and accessing this through this procurement process. The only question I have is that are local businesses in any way allowed to affiliate themselves with us in this process through this group that we'll be accessing?
Yes, thank you for your question. And we do have local vendors. We do have local engineering, a local engineering and consulting firm on the that is on the list.
Okay.
But the opportunity is open to all vendors to be on that preferred vendors list or pre-qualified vendor list through Central Source.
Okay, so really everybody within the community that that is in this industry would have the opportunity to be on there. So I guess one of the things I want to ensure that our own folks, I guess, that sort of buy their bread and milk in our community have the opportunity to participate in this through this process as well.
Yes, absolutely.
And I think that's very important, and it's they also stand to gain. Local businesses that are part of this also have the ability then to market themselves to a larger base. They do take the trade-off though, and they acknowledge that by us also opening it from this perspective, that they will stand scrutiny, as they always do. So it's really, they felt it, in talking to some local businesses, they feel it's better to have the opportunity to get out to a broader range and grow their knowledge and opportunities in a bigger basis than they have today by joining such as this program through Central Source. Any other questions or comments from council? So James said basically this would be a first time and we'll try it, and you'll bring back a report after the dust sort of settles to council and say this is what our findings are and we feel this is of adding value to the community. Is that the intention then?
Yes, Mayor, that is the intention. Is this type of platform or group purchasing organizations is often used for capital items such as graders, snowplows, lawnmowers, and things of that sort. And they are starting to expand to consulting or engineering services. So we thought this would be an opportune project to pilot it, see how it works, and then work with our procurement officer to determine policies and procedures so others can get on this if the system proves to be advantageous. So yes, a report will be coming back summarizing all of that.
All right, thank you. Is there any other questions from council? Before I call for the question, I'll just look to the city clerk. Is this a two-part? This would be two motions, I would expect.
Yes, the one says assume advantage, the other commits funds.
Yes, thank you. All right, I will look for direction on 6.5.3 in the form of two motions from council. Excuse me. Councilor Buckingham.
Move the council approve the use of buying groups and group purchasing organizations, GPO, utilizing Central Source, formerly known as Assume Advantage, to secure the services of a qualified engineering consultant to complete engineering, detailed design, and project pre-planning on behalf of the City of Lloydminster associated with the Central Business District Replacement Program, Planning and Design Project, project number 2013604.
Thank you, Councillor. Looking for a seconder from council. Councillor Fagnan, thank you very much. Is there any further discussion on the motion that's been presented? Not seeing any, I'll call for the question. All in favor?
Thank you, Your Worship.
Opposed? Carried. Councillor Buckingham, if you'd be so kind.
Move the council authorize administration to procure the goods and services required through the Central Source for the Central Business District Replacement Program, Planning and Design, up to the approved capital budget of $300,000 to be allocated from the 2020 capital budget, project number 2013604, and that the mayor and city clerk be authorized to sign and seal all necessary documents.
Thank you. Look for a seconder on that motion. Councillor Monroe, thank you very much. Any further discussion? Not seeing any, I'll call for the question. All in favor?
Thank you, Your Worship.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, James. And I see through the city manager, you'll be on to 6.5.4, but I'd just like to call back Councillor Torreson at this time. Did somebody else have him up? Come on back. Okay. There he is. Perfect. Thank you very much, Councillor. All right, James, if you'd please carry on with 6.5.4.
3 of 4, we're almost there. So before you is the community services building and site demolition, the contractor award.
One
The
before.
recommendation is that
Sorry,
council approve the award of the community services building and site demolition contractors to Silverado Demolition Incorporated.
James?
Saskatoon.
James?
Yes.
You jumped one.
Oh, I'm on the wrong one. My apologies.
That's okay. You were going off so well, I didn't want to interrupt, but
We'll try this one with the same gusto, I guess.
certainly. Good.
Good. Okay, sorry about that. Before you is the 2020 traffic signal hardware upgrades contractor award. The recommendation is that council approve the 2020 traffic signal hardware upgrades contractor award to Cana Energy Limited of Calgary, Alberta, in the amount of $234,456.81, excluding GST, to be allocated from the 2020 2020 capital budget project number 2013611, and that the mayor and city clerk be authorized to sign and seal all necessary documents. In addition, that council approve a contingency allowance of 15% in the amount of $35,168.52, excluding GST, to be allocated from the 2020 capital budget project number 20136611. Due to age and condition of the existing pedestrian half signal infrastructure, existing infrastructure is in need of replacement to ensure adequate levels of service and safety for residents and motorists within and passing through the city of Lloydminster. The 2020 traffic signal hardware upgrade project will comprise of replacing the traffic signal hardware at various pedestrian half signal controlled intersections within the city. The locations to be upgraded include the following: 55th Street and 50th Avenue, 44th Street and 56th Avenue, 44th Street and 47th Avenue. Administration prepared and issued a design build bid document to secure the services of an experienced prime contractor on May 22nd, 2020. The design build approach was selected as it provided project efficiencies, assisting with reduced overall project delivery costs and timelines. This approach followed industry standards used in other municipalities for traffic signal work. As such, the successful contractor will be completing the detailed design, the construction, and the final implementation of the upgraded pedestrian half signals. The city project team will provide design review and construction supervision services to ensure the project delivery adheres to the requirements of the bid document and of the city of Lloydminster. The tender period closed on June 11th, 2020, with 2 bids being received and reviewed for correctness. Construction for this project is anticipated to start in July 2020 and is expected to be completed by November 30th, 2020. Now I'll turn it back over to Mayor and Council for any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, James. Questions or comments? Councillor Buckingham.
Thank you, Worship. Thanks again, James. So this basically is all of the pedestrian control crossings we have left in the city, correct?
I believe this will be 3 of the oldest ones. We do have a newer set of pedestrian half signals on College Drive or 25th Street.
Right. So when those 3, the 2 main ones, on the highway there, will be changed up, will they still have the ability to press the button, or they just get in coordination with the rest of the timing?
So that's, thank you for the question and for bringing that forward. So the pedestrian half signals are not included in our 44th Street corridor or our Centrex and the EDaptive system that we've just rolled out. Because they are not always activated, the standard condition would be green, so traffic can flow through them. They do not need to be coordinated with the rest of the corridor. The Centrex system that we've rolled out along 44th Street and we intend to implement on 50th Avenue or Highway 17 has the ability to sense that the platoon of vehicles has stopped somewhere along the way, adjust its timing and coordination, and then make up for that loss. It would treat it very similar to if there was a car accident or other event stopping traffic from flowing. So they will be included, but they do not control the rest of the corridor.
Okay, good. Thanks, James.
Thank you. Councillor Torreson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, just to make sure totally clear on that there, James, is that so the system we do have, although it does not communicate, it adjusts for the stoplights there all the same. It's smart enough to know that something has happened.
Correct.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, my concern was when we were going with a different vendor and potentially different technology that somehow we would have made our system that we just spent a whole bunch of money on not work. But what you're suggesting is there's no issue, no concern there.
No issue and no concern. We have specified to this contractor our preferred hardware vendor that we have used along Highway 16. We will implement along Highway 17, and we've started changing out all the hardware at the rest of our intersections. So it will be compatible. And then, as I said, the pedestrian half signals will sit in a green or allowing free flow traffic until somebody pushes them, and then the system will adjust automatically, sensing that a platoon of vehicles has been stopped or is delayed getting to the next intersection.
Awesome. Thank you, James.
Well, that's great news. I think moving forward in the 21st century as we are, and the technology that's available to help try and move traffic as best as we can with those allowances for pedestrian crosswalks, because they are important. And I just don't think we could build an overpass big enough to accommodate people walking across the top, and they likely wouldn't use it in most cases, I'm afraid, anyways. So that perspective. Any other questions for James? With that, I will look for direction on 6.5.4, the 2020 traffic signal hardware upgrades. Councillor Fagnan.
Thank you, Your Worship. I move that Council approve the 2020 traffic signal hardware upgrades contractor award to Canna Energy Limited of Calgary, Alberta, in the amount of $234,456.81, excluding GST, to be allocated from the 2020 capital budget project number 2013611, and that the mayor and city clerk be authorized to sign and seal all necessary documents. In addition, that council approve a contingency allowance of 15% in the amount of $35,168.52, excluding GST, to be allocated from the 2020 capital budget project number 2013611.
Thank you, Councillor. Look for a seconder on that motion. Councillor Diachuk, thank you very much. Any further discussion before I call for the question on this item? Not seeing any, I'll call for the question. All in favor? Thank you, City Clerk. Opposed? Carried. Moving on to the last one, James, 6.5.5, through the City Manager.
Okay, now Community Services Building and Site Demolition Contractor Award. The recommendation is that Council approve the award of the Community Services Building and Site Demolition Contractor to Silverado Demolition Incorporated of Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, in the amount of $185,500, excluding GST, to be allocated from the 2020 capital budget project number 2013623, and that the mayor and city clerk be authorized to sign and seal all necessary documents. In addition, that council approve a contingency allowance of 15% in the amount of $27,825, excluding GST, to be allocated from the 2020 capital budget project number 2013623. Due to the age and condition of the community services building, the abatement and demolition of the building and returning the site to a green space and gravel parking area has been deemed necessary. The community services building was designed and constructed between 1950 and 1951. In 2018, a consultant completed a building assessment that highlighted several areas where there were significant deficiencies. These deficiencies included, but are not limited to, National Building Code deficiencies, water infiltration in the crawl space that would require the installation of a weeping tile system, and a storm system that requires replacement. Due to these deficiencies and the cost of rehabilitation, the 2019 building report recommended that the building be demolished as it is at the end of its serviceable and useful life. The city issued a bid document to acquire the services of an experienced prime contractor to complete all construction activities for this program on June 4th, 2020. The bid package was issued and posted on the city's bids and tenders website. The tender period closed on June 17th, 2020, with 7 bids being received and reviewed for completeness. The contractors and their total tender amounts are seen in the table below. The demolition and remediation for the site is anticipated to start in July 2020 and is expected to be completed by August 31st of 2020 as well. All tenant lease spaces are now empty and all salvageable items are being removed by the City of Lloydminster. I'll now turn it over to Mayor and Council for any questions you may have.
Thanks very much, James. I'll look to Councillor Thorson.
Thank you, Your Worship. You know, I was just thinking, looking at the budget we had for that item and the overall spread of the bids, it looks like there is certainly some sharpening of some pens to be able to, you know, to be able to do this project significantly under budget, which is good to see. My only question, I guess, with that is, was all else equal in terms of timing, quality, the state they're going to leave it in, everything else between all the bids?
Thank you for your question. I can't comment on the workmanship or how the program would go. I can comment on Silverado Demolition Incorporated's ability to do the work. They were the contractor that completed the Martin Brown School demolition and site reclamation. And we've seen that program completed with a high level of success. So we do not have an issue with Silverado Demolition at this time.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Baker.
Your worship, once the building's knocked down, I think I read reference to a gravel parking lot. I thought we were going to sell that land.
Well, I think that at this time, there hasn't been any direction given to administration. I think that that has potential. At the time, it was in play as a potential for other city facilities, namely a fire hall was when fire hall number 1. So I don't think there's been any direction given to city at this time, but correct me if I'm wrong, city manager.
Yeah, that's correct. We just got some reconfigurate or just subdivision stuff and all that details to work out, and then we'll be bringing something back to council for some direction to move forward on. So I don't have an estimated timeline on that, but I'm hoping it's probably in the next month or so.
I guess, your worship, if we're going to build a gravel parking lot and then sell it, maybe we don't build a gravel parking lot, that's all.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, Councillor. That's a good question. I'll leave that to administration to
leave that up to.
I think James has got a comment.
That's
there.
fine.
Yeah.
So just to answer your question, Councillor Baker, so we are not building a gravel parking lot. The site is currently split up into 2. So the gravel parking lot to the north and then the building to the south. We will be leaving the existing gravel parking lot there to provide additional parking for the Legacy Center as well as local businesses. And then everything to the south of that, we will be turning back to a greenfield state or a landscape area so that it ties in with the rest of the RCMP, City Hall, the Legacy Center, and the landscaping of that corner, to not leave it in an eyesore state, I guess. So we are not building a gravel parking lot.
I guess what I was thinking was, I thought I had read that, but maybe I misunderstood the parking lot, word parking lot, how big it was going to be. It just seems to me it said parking lot, but that's okay.
Thank you, James, for that clarification. Any other questions or comments, council? Not seeing any. I will look for direction from council on 6.5.5 Community Services Building and Site Demolition Contractor Award. Councillor Fagnan.
I move that council approve the award of the Community Service Building and Site Demolition Contractor to Silverado Demolition, Inc. of Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, in the amount of $185,500, excluding GST, to be allocated from the 2020 capital budget project number 2013623, and that the mayor and city clerk be authorized to sign and seal all necessary documents. In addition, that council approve the contingency allowance of 15% in the amount of $27,825, excluding GST, to be allocated from the 2020 capital budget project number 2013623.
Thank you, Councillor. I look for a seconder. Councillor Monroe, sorry, a little tongue twisted here. Councillor Monroe, thank you for the seconding. Any further discussion before I call for the question? Not seeing any. All in favor?
Thank you, Your Worship.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, James.
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Thanks, James.
Moving on to 6.6, Chief of Staff. I'll look to the City Manager.
Thank you, Your Worship. For item 6.6.1, draft policy number 135-03, workplace violence and harassment prevention policy. I'll ask Cindy Perkins to present.
Good afternoon, Your Worship, Council.
Good afternoon, Cindy.
The recommendation today is that Council approve policy number 135-03, workplace violence and harassment prevention policy. and that council repeal policy number 012-2016, harassment policy. The policy is to provide employees with equal employment opportunity, free of workplace violence or harassment, and prohibit all forms of discrimination in the workplace. Council approved policy number 012-2016, harassment policy, on November 14th of 2016. As per the government's document policy, administration is required to review all policies periodically. Administration has completed a full review and is proposing to replace policy number 012-2016, harassment policy, with this updated version. So the City of Lloydminster's workplace violence and harassment prevention policy is created to maintain a harassment-free workplace by ensuring the City of Lloydminster team is committed to an environment where everyone is treated with dignity and respect. The draft workplace violence and harassment prevention policy outlines established practices for the prevention of workplace violence and harassment, commitment to provide support and maintain the confidentiality of employees impacted by workplace violence or harassment, guidelines for proper documentation, investigation, and correction of incidents, and maintain legislative compliance. The options today is that council approve all motions as indicated in the recommendation section above, that council not approve all motions as indicated in the recommendation above, or that council request further information and that the item be brought forward to a future regular council meeting for decision. I pass it back to your worship.
Thank you, Cindy. I'll open the floor for questions or comments from City Council. Councillor Diachak.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. I think it's really important that people understand the significance of workplace harassment, and there's been extensive research on the actual economic impact on employees at work that are coming in that are harassed and bullied, and the impact on not only their emotional health but also physical health. And there's a study, and anyways, it's out and being used extensively, particularly in North America and California, where it originated. But it's a workplace that has a positive, safe work environment tends to have more productive, more creative, imaginative, and happier employees and a positive culture. So this policy goes a long way to addressing that piece. And again, I'm pleased and proud that we have a policy that's been updated and that we continue to focus on creating a workspace that is safe and productive and a place where people can go to work and feel like they can be heard, they can be respected.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments? I think that from the perspective that safety is taken very much, it's the culture of today, and this just adds to the safety culture that we have at the city, ensuring the safety of employees, not necessarily on the work site, but it does protect them on the work site. It protects them in the office, it protects them in the coffee room. And that's what part of this is that we will not tolerate any violence or harassment in the workplace, and that is to protect our employees. Should it be from others, from the public, it's a broad reaching, and it's important that we protect those employees because they are our employees as City Council through the City Manager, and we have a responsibility to ensure their safety. And I appreciate Cindy, you bringing this forward and the updating, as Councillor Diachak said. It's very, very important that we stay current with the laws of the land and ensuring the protection of our staff.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any other comments to add? Not seeing any, I will look for direction from City Council on 6.6.1, the draft policy number 135-03, workplace violence and harassment prevention policy. Councillor Thorson.
I move that council approve policy number 135-03, workplace violence and harassment prevention policy.
Thank you. I'll look for a seconder. Councillor Buckingham. Any further discussion on the question? Not seeing any. All in favor?
Thank you, Your Worship.
Opposed? Carried. And Councillor Buckingham, or Torrenson, if you'd be so kind, please go ahead.
Sure, but whoever's controlling the screen, can they scroll back up again? One page?
How about you say that council repeal policy number 012-2016 harassment policy?
I will do that. I'm finding it. I'm sorry. We're getting so close. I move that council repeal policy number 012-2016 harassment policy.
Thank you, Councillor. Seconder, Councillor Buckingham. Thank you very much. Any further discussion? Not seeing any. I'll call for the question. All in favor?
Thank you.
Pretty good, John.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, councillors.
The reason I don't do that many of those, you can see
Thanks.
why.
Thanks. Thank you very much. Moving on to.
I'll step out here now.
Okay, councillor, and I'll send you a text as soon as we're past that one.
Please do.
All right. Moving on to item number 7, bylaws, city manager.
Thank you, Your Worship. For number 7.1, bylaw number 21-2020, text amendment to land use bylaw number 5-2016, roof signs. I'll ask Anthony Andre to present.
He is in the meeting. I've just asked him to start his video.
There he is.
Perfect. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can, Anthony. Welcome.
All right, perfect. Good afternoon, Mayor. The purpose of the report is to recommend that council grant first reading to bylaw number 21-2020, being a bylaw to amend the text of land use bylaw number 5-2016 to include provisions for roof signs within the commercial and all industrial land use districts. Roof signs are not currently permitted within the city. However, due to unique site characteristics in some cases, the opportunity for freestanding or fascia signs, which would be visible from the street, is not possible for some businesses. The lack of an option for businesses to utilize roof signs contrasts with many comparable municipalities within Alberta and Saskatchewan, where roof signs are allowed in many commercial and industrial districts subject to conditions. After review, administration prepared an amendment to the text of the land use bylaw as it pertains to roof signs to better align with best practices of comparable municipalities. The proposed bylaw amendment lists roof signs as a discretionary use in the highway corridor, commercial, service commercial, light industrial, medium industrial, and heavy industrial districts, and places development standards regulating roof signs within them. Administration issued internal and external referrals, as well as advertised a public referral in the Meridian Source, May 28th, June 4th, and June 11th, 2020, to solicit comment. No concerns were received pertaining to the proposed bylaw. This item was also brought forward for discussion during the GPC committee meeting held June 15th, 2020. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anthony. Questions or comments? Councillor Baker.
Just one quick question. Thank you. We refer to no lighting, electric lighting on the sign, and I'm not sure why that is. I understand it if it's light that obstructs traffic, but I'm thinking of low-level LED lighting that may not affect traffic at all. And I believe there's signs out there like that, not necessarily in Lloydminster, but there are roof signs that you can read them and they're lit up, but they don't really reflect light on the roadways like street lights or other things like that. I just wondered why we were eliminating them.
Yeah, I think the idea had to do with traffic and distractions, that sort of nature. Just roof signs, just the nature of them, their location, being up high. We wanted to make sure that it wasn't going to have any sort of negative impact to neighboring properties or traffic flow.
Just a follow-up question of me, or in industrial areas, this isn't in residential, allowed in residential areas anyway, or close to it as far as I could see. But there's a lot of big industrial buildings that have 16, 18, 20-foot walls, and they have signage at the 16, 18-foot level, and some of them are lighted. Where do they fit in?
Well, those would be under freestanding signs for the most part, or fascia signs, as opposed to roof signs for the most part. I do know that there are some instances of roof signs that exist. The idea is that this bylaw would require those signs to be permitted and be brought to current standards unless they existed prior to 2016, where we had a sign by law in place that did regulate roof signs. So if signs were existing at the time and were properly permitted, then
So they're grandfathered in.
Pardon?
They're grandfathered in?
That would be correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Torreson.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I think I had a little confusion here. So the signs will now be grandfathered in if they were put up prior to the new land use bylaw in 2016?
Correct. If they were permitted and met the conditions of the day.
But then anything that's been put up in the last 4 years, let's say, is now required to get a permit, or if they do not, then there's just a process that you go through as far as saying that there is a non-conformance on that property that's kind of on file with that property.
That's correct. So any signs constructed, any roof signs constructed within the last several years, we will be requiring them to obtain permits.
Sorry, you're requiring them to obtain permits, but they actually have to get those permits, or is there just a non-conformance that goes on that file? And then when it goes to sell or change hands, or a development permit is issued for that property, at which time they would have to ensure that it complies?
They will be required to make an application to obtain the permit. If the sign doesn't meet our regulations that we're proposing, there is an option for them to appeal our decision to refuse that permit to the SDAB, and the SDAB has the ability to allow that sign or not.
And there was a few requirements that you mentioned for, or that was mentioned at the last meeting for getting a permit. What does the process look like? Is there anything specific in terms of consultation that's needed?
Yes. So we're only allowing roof signs as a discretionary use in all of the districts that was listed earlier. So there would be a form of public consultation with that, which would include a mail out within a 30-meter radius.
Okay. So if I'm being totally transparent in what I'm thinking, because I was under the impression that this didn't force existing properties to do anything. I thought I recalled Natasha say at the last meeting that there was a requirement for engineered stamped kind of work to be done on all the existing signs. Is that correct?
That's
on
correct.
On new signs moving forward. I didn't realize it was anything built in the last 4 years. But it's anything built in the last 4 years would require engineer stamp.
Right. And the idea behind that is to ensure that these signs are constructed to a safe standard.
Okay. In that case, I am going to turn off my camera and step away from the meeting, just because I feel like there's potentially conflict just based on my employer and the nature of the work. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Baker.
Your Worship, there shouldn't be any signs on buildings that are 4 years or younger, if you want to put it that way. If one applies for a development permit, that signage, I know it's a separate permit from the building structure, but we should be telling people when they take out a building permit for an industrial building or something that would accommodate or would like to accommodate a rooftop sign, we should be including that in our documents when they take out a building permit, not when they go to get the sign after the building's built. Because I'm with Councillor Thorson, there is a sign permit bylaw, and you go to get a sign permit to put a sign up and then they turn you down. And I think builders should have that information at the planning stage, not after the building's standing up. And maybe it is, I don't know, but I've never heard of that before, other than you just have to have a sign permit.
I'm not sure if Anthony or Executive Manager Stang wants to address that. Executive Manager Stang?
Yeah, my understanding is there are a couple that have been put up in the last 4 years that don't have permits, as our bylaw did not permit it. So they either went up without our knowledge or are up there with no permit or no request to have a permit for that.
That answer your question, Councilor Baker?
A part of it. I just hope that when people take out building permits, somewhere in the documents we hand them, it says that you must have a sign permit before anything's constructed. And maybe you have, I don't know.
Yeah, our bylaw does, the land use bylaw does speak to signs. Now, in that land use bylaw previous from 2016 to today's discussion, roof signs were not permitted in the city as a whole. Now, there were some prior to 2016 that went up, shake your head, Anthony. I do believe there's some pre-2016 that would be non-compliant, but there have been some in the last 4 years that we will need to bring into compliance under this new bylaw text amendment.
But my point is, when you issue a permit for a new building, there should be a clause in the handout sheet, just what you said, Don. Just as a heads up, you can say it's in the land use bylaw, but unfortunately, people don't read the land use bylaw. They do whatever the development officer tells them. Trust me.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, Councillor, and because they were not permitted, we never did speak to roof signs. That's kind of where I'm at. But I hear what you're saying for sure, Councillor.
Yeah. Councillor Diachak, thank you very much, Councillor Baker and Executive Manager Stang.
Thanks, Your Worship. So I guess when I look at it, the most significant difference for me is that you could have a sign that would be built onto the side of the building and would be acceptable. But if you wanted to put that same sign on the top of the roof, now you have to meet some engineering standards. So it's less about the sign and more about the location. Because I get distracted a bit when I see that, illumination of the sign and all those other pieces. But really, it seems that in this bylaw, it's more concerned about, the safety on there. But there's elements like no more than one roof sign per site. And this, again, it's an industrial area as well, and not going beyond the eaves or parapet of the roof. So I find it a little confusing. That doesn't mean I don't understand it, but like I said, you could have a sign that someone has next door and it'll be perfect to put on the side of the building. But if you wanted to take that exact same sign, put your own logo on it on the top of the building, that might not work. And that's a challenge for me.
Anthony, can you comment on that?
Sure. So no matter what type of sign you're installing, whether it's a fascia sign, roof sign, we do have standards and regulations pertaining to size, location, height, that sort of thing. So it's not wildly different from regulations that we would have for other types of signs, for sure. The engineering piece is a little bit a little bit of a step up, I suppose, and that's just largely due to some of the feedback that we've received from our building inspectors and that sort of thing, of what other municipalities are doing with this particular type of signage.
So, but just a follow up though, so if I have a fascia sign, there would be limitations on the illumination or electronic messaging as well.
To some extent, yes.
Okay. Because on the roof sign it said shall not, but the fascia sign is maybe a little bit.
Right. Yeah, there may not be an illumination restriction on fascia signs.
Okay.
Any other questions for administration? So, Executive Manager Stang.
Yeah, Your Worship, that's something we can definitely look into deeper, Councillor Diachuk, with regards to the illumination. I do understand prior to Natasha left, she did kind of give us an update, and it was to reduce the amount of exposure to adjacent properties, whether that be commercial, industrial, or residential. Typically, roof signs are higher than the normal fascia mounted signs and those types of things. So, and all the recommendations planning is bringing forward is kind of taking what other municipalities are doing and how they're managing these roof signs. So we're kind of following some preset standards of other municipalities, and there are municipalities out there that don't permit them the way we currently do it. So, you know, there's a little bit of a mixed bag, and that's something we can, you know, from an illumination perspective, if that's something you want us to look at a little bit deeper, we can bring further information back during and an amendment if that is what is required upon second and third and final reading.
I thank you if I could, because I think that would be important. Because if I'm living, my business is next to the next guy's. His building is higher than mine, and his sign is higher than my building even. And he has a sign that I would like to use, but I can't put it up there because it's not a fascia sign. I have difficulty with that, and simply because mine's a roof sign and his a fascia sign. All of a sudden, the illumination's not an issue. It's more about the engineering, and if the engineering's in place, then I don't know. Because I mean, I think Councillor Baker talked about illumination. There are a lot of different, you know, sort of lighting technologies out there, and I understand the distracted part of it. I get it, but it seems like, you know, there's just a bit of a gap between one and the other, and maybe I need to go back and look at the other signage bylaw. That was what I should do.
We'll bring that more detail forward and more descriptive understanding of that when we bring second reading forward.
It's Councillor Fagnan, then Councillor Baker.
I guess at the end of the day, the main thing is that whatever the decision may be from administration, if a building owner is not happy with it, does have the opportunity to go to the Subdivision and Development Appeals Board for a final decision. So if they're not happy, that's their one way to also get a decision as well. So I'm happy with that.
Councillor Baker.
You know, Your Worship, this is where when you want people want to have mixed zoning, you get into trouble. That's why you have zoning, industrial, commercial, et cetera, et cetera. And so say you're up in the Glennie Nielsen and or the Hill Industrial, what's the difference? They're a mile away from residential, you might say. Would probably hurt nothing. But if you put it on 50th Avenue, half a block from downtown, it might. Now you take the Lakeland College, wanted to put a sign up, advertise their college. You know what happened there. You know, there's a difference because Lakeland College is built right in the middle of a residential area. You know, the public school division, I believe, are electronic signs on their building. And there's 10 houses right across the street from it. Do you get any complaints for it? But they must be 20 feet in the air. It's a two-story building. I would think I'm not sure now. But is that causing a problem? Sometimes we want to overmanage. I think the part that's really good about the signage is these big signage is proper engineering instructions how to install them so they don't fall off the building and kill somebody. That's the big issue in my mind. So that's for whatever that's worth.
Point well taken, Councillor. Any other comments? And I see, as I read into this will require a public hearing, so businesses and individuals will have the opportunity to come before council if they have concerns or pro or con against the bylaws. So I do appreciate that. No further questions? I'll look for direction from council regarding 7.1. Get the exact title, so I've got it. Bylaw number 21-2020, text amendment to the land use bylaw. Number 5-2016, roof signs. Councillor Diachuk.
Move that council grant first reading to bylaw number 21-2020, being a bylaw to amend the text of land use bylaw number 5-2016 to include provisions for roof signs within some commercial districts and all industrial districts, and that council establish a public hearing to be held during the regular council meeting on July 20th, 2020 at 2 p.m.
Thank you, Councillor. Seconded by Councillor Fagnan. Any further discussion? Not seeing any. I will call for the question. All in favor?
Thank you, Your Worship.
Opposed? Carried. And I will invite the other councillors back in. And thank you very much, Anthony.
Thank you.
Thanks, Anthony.
One councillor and two. Get Councillor Buckingham back in, I hope. There he is. Terrific. Moving on to agenda item 7.2, City Manager.
Thank you, Your Worship. For 7.2, bylaw number 22-2020, the library bylaw, I'll ask Joel Turcotte to present.
Good afternoon, Your Worship, Council.
Good afternoon, Joel.
I'm here today to recommend the council grant first reading, bylaw number 22-2020, the library bylaw. The Lloydminster Public Library Board, City of Lloydminster Administration have been working together to come up with governance model that'll be of benefit to the Lloydminster Public Library and its patrons now into the future. Currently, the Lloydminster Public Library Board is not considered a municipal library. Pursuant to Alberta and Saskatchewan legislation, as no bylaw exists setting the Lloydminster Library Board. City Council appoints board members, and a City Council member does sit on the board. However, City Council has no legislative authority to change or remove the board. On the April 20th, 2020 regular council meeting, through motion number 114-2020, Council directed administration to bring forward a bylaw to establish the Lloydminster Library Board pursuant to the Libraries Act, Alberta. The Act recognizes the distinctive role of public libraries as a key point of access to information for citizens. The Libraries Act, Alberta, and library regulations define the Municipal Library Board's operations and responsibilities and places the formation of the Library Board on City Council through the formal bylaw. Once established, the Lloydminster Library Board is the legal entity that manages and controls the library services for the community on behalf of City Council. The Lloydminster Library Board will be a governing body, not an advisory body, with full management controls of the Lloydminster Public Library. Bylaw number 2020-2020, the library bylaw, shall establish a library board for the City of Lloydminster, who shall, in accordance with the Libraries Act and Libraries Regulation, Alberta, organize, promote, and maintain comprehensive, efficient library services to the City of Lloydminster. And then your options are there. Under alignment with strategic plan, this item is in alignment with the following strategic area: public library and legislative compliance. Encourage a strong and supportive relationship between the Lloydminster Library Board, City of Lloydminster, that recognizes and prioritizes public library services. And I'll pass it back to you, Your Worship, for any questions.
Thanks, Joel. Councillor Thorson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just one comment I had is more for the agenda report than anything. I think that going in this direction really, to me, is more of a housekeeping item in terms of just formalizing more or less the relationship that already exists and kind of having some legislative background, within the provinces to kind of direct us a little bit, as well as just having the legislative ability to actually do a lot of the things we already do. My only issue is that if someone read the City Council has no legislative authority to change or remove the board, I'm just concerned that someone reading that and that in isolation might think, so they're doing this because they want to remove the board. And that's not the case. It's just, to me, giving us the formal legislative authority to do some of the things that we already do, which is appoint members to the board and help from the perspective of advertising for board positions, different things like that. So just to make sure it's clear that we're not doing this solely to take control of the board to remove everyone or anything wacky and crazy like that. more so just to formalize, the relationship that already exists. Is that a correct statement?
I believe it is.
Yes, thank you.
Any other questions or comments from council? Councillor Baker.
Your worship, I'm just going back through what I read in the bylaw. Jonathan brought up the point about control and who controls it. And I think there's a conflict between the administration report and the bylaw somewhere where it says the city manager can do this or that, or I just can't find it.
So I believe item number 5, Councillor Baker, if that's helped, 5.1.1, the city manager or delegate is hereby appointed as a city liaison, and that he's a non-voting, he or she would be a non-voting member and provide documentation as the board members, and we provided all documentation. So it's really, I'm not trying to find the right word. It is a liaison from directly, as well as the ability to have city council members, up to 2 council members appointed to the board, as we currently have 1 member. And correct me if I'm wrong, city manager, but I believe the executive manager Stang has attended library board meetings in the past with the respective councillor, be it Councillor Monroe or Councillor Torreson.
Yeah, that's correct, in a non-voting capacity. And if you look under the definitions, under city manager, it says the commissioner of the city of Lloydminster as appointed by council or designate. So, it's up to me to appoint somebody to go, myself or somebody else to go or designate somebody to attend those board meetings, if desired.
So does that answer your question, Councillor Baker?
I'll get it at the next reading.
Okay, no problem. I think we're just going to see this formalized. I know that's the one thing as I followed this process, it will be more formal because as the city clerk.
I don't disagree with it, your worship. I'm just saying I thought there was a conflict between the 2 statements. Now I lost it.
Okay, when you find it, we'll pick it up. Sounds good. All right. Any other questions or comments?
Councillor Monroe, I believe, wanted to say something.
Councillor Monroe.
Yeah, I just want to chime in. And the library board did have the opportunity to review this as well. And there are some good alignments just with really the Libraries Act in general. So it is, like Councillor Torreson said, more of a housekeeping item, just so that the city is in alignment with the library and, it's just more official, if you will. And I guess as far as the city manager, a delegate, the library meetings are open to the public. So at any time, anybody can come to a meeting, anybody from the general public. And I guess in the past, if there was ever not good communication between council and administration, it would maybe be perhaps more necessary to have a member from administration there. But I think in the last few years and what have you, that there's been good communication from council to administration to relay the information that has been developing at the meetings. So, the necessity of the city manager to be there is not necessarily prudent, but rather just that they have the ability to come should they desire to. So
thank you, Councillor. Executive Manager Stang.
Yeah, I just 2 things. Currently our charter is silent on library boards and the bylaws. So that's the biggest reason of bringing this forward is library will stay on the Alberta side. So we're following Alberta legislation and that's what the bylaw pertains. And within the admin report, I think maybe the last sentence in the background is taken out of context. What it meant is the library board must stay in existence and has to be there to oversee the library, and that's what can't be removed. Although the members and who gets appointed to the board is in the full discretion and authority of the Lloydminster City Council.
Thank you for that information. Any other further questions or comments? Not seeing any, I'll look for direction on 7.2, the bylaw 2022-2020 library bylaw. Councillor Buckingham.
Move the council grant first reading to bylaw 22-2020, the library bylaw.
Thank you. I'll look for a seconder. Councillor Torreson, thank you very much. Any further discussion before I call for the question? Not seeing any. All in favor?
Thank you, Worship.
Opposed, carried. Thank you very much, Joelle, for that update. Moving on to 7.3, bylaw 20-2020 election bylaw. I'll look to the city manager.
Thank you, Your Worship. For item number 7.3, bylaw 2020 election bylaw, I'll ask Doug Rodwell, the city clerk, to present.
Thank you, Your Worship and Council. The item before you is that the council grant first reading to bylaw 20-2020, the election bylaw. As council is aware, the next municipal election is to be held on November 9th, 2020. And with all elections, the City of Lloydminster follow Local Government Election Act 2015. The act states the council may pass a bylaw providing for the use of voting machines and other items. Within this bylaw, when council saw it from the at GPC, council had indicated that they'd like to see a requirement for candidates' disclosure contributions in a total of $250 above, and the bylaw has been adjusted to see that, or to reflect that, sorry. The options are the council grant first reading to the bylaw, council not approve the bylaw, council request further information, and I will pass it back to you, Your Worship.
Thank you, City Clerk. Any questions or comments on the proposed bylaw? We had a very thorough discussion during last week's GPC about this, and appreciate the City Clerk making some amendments as discussed by council. If there's no questions, I'll look for direction from council on first reading. Councilor Thorson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I actually did have a question, and it's just the circumstances that would lead to mail-in ballots. I know there's something that, at least on the news, they're somewhat controversial, and we're saying that, you know, we would like the ability to consider them. Essentially, I would think that was COVID related that this would be added in, but I was just curious what the thoughts are on that.
City Clerk.
Actually, previously in our previous election, there was some requests for mail-in ballots. Unfortunately, we were unable to do that. Mail-in ballots are very common, and they're used when a person is unable to be in the jurisdiction during the actual election or during an advanced poll. They're strictly controlled. There's no extra ballots that are made in, those type of things. So we and the identity of the voters very clearly maintained. They're a very common item and shouldn't be something that's feared, but should be used judiciously.
City Manager.
Yeah, the other part of that was maybe pushing a little more is the moving back of the municipal election to November versus the traditional third week in October. So that's put a little bit more demand on that, but in addition to what the city clerk has been saying.
Any other questions or comments? Not seeing any, I'll take direction on 7.3 from City Council. Councilor Thorson.
Yeah, I move that council grant first reading to bylaw number 20-2020 election bylaw.
Thank you. I'll look for seconder. Councilor Buckingham. Thank you very much. Any further discussion before I call for the question, Council? Not seeing any. All in favor?
Thank you, Your Worship.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, City Clerk. Moving on to item number 8, Mayor and Council reports. My report is attached for council and the public's information. There has been a lot of, we continue on as we're dealing with COVID. There's been a lot of conference calls and Zoom meetings and various other meetings. Have started to attend a few annual general meetings and things like that of organizations that are now going virtual. So what we're doing today is no longer the non-norm, it's the new norm. And certainly appreciate the invitations. I did have the opportunity to speak to one grade 2 class from St. Joseph's School, and we had a Zoom meeting over that and answered some questions. So we have had a series of meetings ongoing with the province, and we're still in contact with both the provincial governments in Saskatchewan and Alberta on various programs, the need for various programs. As we discussed meet today, that was some good work we felt from the municipalities of Saskatchewan and their lobbying of the Saskatchewan government, and we're hoping that AUMA and their discussions with the government of Alberta, we're looking forward to hopefully seeing some more further assistance in that port. So we might have to dip into 2021 budget just yet, but we'll see where that goes. So other than that, I don't have anything else. Is there any counselor that has anything to report directly? Not seeing any. I will move to item number 9, which is there any other matters at this time this council needs to deal with? Not seeing any acknowledged. I will look for inquiries from the media, and I'll look to Eric.
Thank you, Your Worship. And today we have interview requests for yourself, Mayor Albers, and Councillor Buckingham.
All right, thank you very much. I will look for a motion to go into recess. Councillor Diachuk, followed by a seconder, Councillor Fagnan. All in favor?
Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you.